Good morning. Being 9 a.m., I'll call to order the McHenry County Board Committee of the Whole meeting of November 10th, 2022. And today, Ms. Meshes will lead us in the pledge. Okay, Alicia, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Abang. Here. Acosta. Here. Altoff. Here. Bates. Campbell. Here. Collins.
Here.
Doherty.
Here.
Godemaller. Here. Gendrich. Here. Young. Here. Kearns. Here. Meshes. Here. Nowak. Here. Parrish. Here. Schofield. Here. Schwartz. Scala.
Present.
Smith.
Here.
Thorson.
Here.
Vijek.
Here.
Von Bergen. Here. Wegener. Here. Wilbeck. Jensen. Here.
Okay, having a quorum, we'll move on. Is there any public comment? Public comment. So good morning. I'd like, a lot has changed since we last spoke. I'd like to congratulate all the winners in Tuesday's election and thank you to everyone who invested the time and effort to run for public office. I'm looking forward to working with the new county board, familiar faces and new ones as well, starting with the organizational meeting next month. Next Tuesday evening, we'll recognize those of you who are leaving and thank you for your service. I'd also like to thank County Clerk Joe Theriot and his staff for their hard work in making sure the election went smoothly and that every registered voter who wanted to participate, be it through early voting, voting by mail, or casting their ballot at the polling place on Election Day, was able to do so conveniently and securely. On Tuesday, November 1st, I had the honor of attending the McHenry County Economic Development Corporation annual dinner, along with County Administrator Pete Austin and Board Member Mike Scala, who both sit on the Board of Directors. Several other county board members and staff were also in attendance, and I really appreciate the great turnout. I think there was about 400 people there, which is great. I took the opportunity to talk about the success stories that continue to come from the Advanced McHenry County Grant Program, and the MCEDC did a great job recognizing the recipients of its annual Business Championship Awards. It was also my pleasure to introduce keynote speaker Kyle Schultz, Executive Vice President of Business Development and Global Strategy for the World Business Chicago. Kyle came to discuss the proposed Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership and explain how the partnership will benefit the Collar Counties and Chicago by bringing them together to work for the economic benefit of the entire region. And this morning, I'm excited to announce that the next county board will be holding a workshop to review the current McHenry County strategic plan immediately following the Committee of the Whole meeting on January 12th. I anticipate that the COW will have a light agenda, given that we'll have a newly seated board and not a lot of committee business to review. I'd like to spend some time in familiarizing the new board with our strategic plan and what has been accomplished to date, as well as contemplating new issues and ideas. The workshop will include lunch, and we will invite our countywide elected officials, department heads, and senior managers as well. I'm happy to report that the project to replace the county's electronic signs at the Treasurer's Office on Route 47 here in Woodstock and at Animal Control on Route 14 in Crystal Lake has begun. These signs give us yet another avenue in which we can communicate news and information to the public. Our communications staff is learning how to use the software and will be putting the signs to use once they're ready. Countywide elected officers and department heads can reach out to communications and project manager Alicia Schuler with any messaging needs. Since Monday, McHenry County has joined local governments nationwide in participating in Operation Greenlight, thanks to the proclamation this county board passed last month. The green light that we have placed at the entrance to the county administration building not only honors the sacrifices and service of our veterans, but also brings attention to our Veterans Assistance Commission and the benefits that our men and women in uniform have earned. On Monday, our communications staff sent out a news release on Operation Greenlight and the VAC, and also premiered the first of a series of brief videos to alert veterans to the services the VAC offers. It's been posted on our YouTube page and our social media sites, and I encourage all of you to check it out and to forward it to friends and family who have served. Saw the video the other day, and staff did an amazing job. It's just really great, and talked to a couple of veterans, and they really appreciate it as well. So tomorrow is Veterans Day, and on behalf of myself, the county board, and the people of McHenry County, thank you to everyone who served our great nation in the armed forces. Many businesses nationwide are showing their appreciation by offering veterans discounts, and I hope they can take the time to enjoy those well-earned tokens of gratitude. And finally, on a related note, today happens to be the anniversary of the founding of the United States Marine Corps. So I'd wish them a happy 247th birthday. And that's all I have today. Move on to reports and presentations, and today we have with us Tony Cusinato from Gift of Hope to lead us off.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity for letting me come in and present to this morning. Dr. Rain with the coroner's office asked me about a month ago if I would be willing to come in and talk about Gift of Hope. And being a McHenry County resident, I jumped at the opportunity. By hands, how many are you familiar with Gift of Hope? One? All right, well then this is a great opportunity to educate everybody. Gift of Hope is one of 57 OPOs, organ procurement organizations, that handle all the organ and tissue donation in northern 3/4 of Illinois, as well as Lake County, Indiana. As you can see here, our mission is to give everyone the opportunity to enhance and save the lives of as many people as possible through organ and tissue donation. As I said, we are a non-for-profit, federally designated organ procurement organization, federally designated by the United States. We serve 12 million people in our service area, and we coordinate all organ and tissue donation. We provide professional and public education, just like today. There we go. As I said, there are certain laws that we have to follow that give us guidance. Any hospital, since we work with 180 of them, any hospital that is receiving Medicare and Medicaid is required to notify us of any death or imminent death that comes to their hospital. Gift of Hope alone is the only one that can decide if that person is a candidate for organ donation and tissue donation. Uniform Anatomical Gift Act. This allows you to designate yourself as an organ donor or a tissue donor. Once you sign up on the registry, you are going to be an organ donor. Your family cannot say, no, I don't want them to be an organ donor. Once the person passes away, it becomes a legally binding contract as a first person authorization. Prior to 2006, if you signed on the registry, we still needed to get authorization from your family. Since 2006, they changed the law to make it a legally binding contract. So in those cases where you are a donor, I ask that you please let your family know, because that's a lot of the conflict that we get at the hospital when we start working a case. A lot of times families don't realize that their loved one is a donor and they want to provide a gift to somebody else after they've gone. So that's the biggest obstacle. And when families are at the hospital, they have no control. They've lost control because their loved one is going to die. So they want some sort of control back. So we kind of walk them through the process and be there for their support to make sure that they are comfortable at the end. The Illinois Anatomical Gift Act provides kind of a good faith protection for anybody that makes those decisions in regards to us moving forward with organ donation. So if a family does have any problems or questions, they can come to us and we'll walk them through the process as well as the first person authorization. A little bit on organ donation. The organs that can be recovered: heart, lung, liver, pancreas, kidney, intestine. So that's 6 lives right there that one donor can save. Technically, the lungs and the kidneys can be split, so that's 2 additional lives. Also, the liver can be, a section of the liver can be taken out and donated as well, so that's up to 9 lives with one donor. On average, we recover 3 organs per donor, so that's 3 lives on average that is saved. There are 2 types of donation. One is going to be after brain death, and the other one's going to be after circulatory death. Brain death is when you have an injury to the point where your brain has herniated and there is no communication with the rest of your body. Once the doctor runs all the tests to declare brain death, that's when we get involved. Gift of Hope does, when the hospital gives us a call, we sit in the background and do not get involved until the doctor decides that they're going to do brain death testing and the patient's been declared dead, or the family has started talking about withdrawing care. In order to be an organ donor, you have to be on a vent at time of death. So those are our 2 options. Circulatory death is when the person has suffered a severe injury and the family knows that patient does not want to live, a certain way. There's going to be no quality of life. So the family is going to decide to withdraw comfort care. And that's when we decide to approach the family and start the process of organ donation. Every referral counts. Like I said, you have to be on a vent at time of death. So the number of deaths at the hospital that are on a vent at that time, less than 2% of the deaths at the hospital actually qualify for organ donation. And 15% of that 2% actually become donors. So you can see how the numbers dwindle quite a bit once we start getting involved, because we go through all the testing, serologies, trying to allocate the organs to see if there is anybody that is a match. Sometimes there's not, sometimes there is. So we actually take usually 2 to 3 days after the person has been declared dead to allocate the organs before we actually recover. Tissue donation. There you go. As you can see, 1 in 20 Americans will need tissue transplant. How many have had any dental work done? ACLs, ligaments, torn shoulders, any type of surgery that requires any type of tissue. When I thought of tissue the first time I started working with them, I thought of skin. I did not realize bone, veins, cartilage, corneas, all fall under the tissue category. Skin, they say tissue donation is life enhancing. I like to argue that because it's also life saving. There are plenty of burn victims out there that would not have survived without skin grafts. Heart valves, I'm sure plenty of people know somebody that's had heart surgery or heart valve replacements. That's from a tissue donor. Bone and tendons. The femur can actually be sliced up, crushed down for dental surgery, implants. So there's a lot of uses out there for tissue donation. Veins and arteries, cartilage. It's amazing the advancements of the medical field and what they can be used for. We work directly with Eversight, who handles all our cornea transplants and recoveries. So there's plenty of opportunity for eye surgery. There is a time restraint in regards to tissue donation. We have, if they are found and brought into cooling within a certain amount of time, we have up to 24 hours. Otherwise, we have 15 hours if we don't know the last time alive and they're not cooled. So there is a time-sensitive segment in this, and working with the coroner's office, this has made a huge impact. Prior to October of 2021, let's see, since 2016 through 2020, the coroner's office has referred 4 times. I started working with their office, and in October of 2021, we created a policy for on-scene deaths. So in the past, all deaths at hospitals are called in. Coroner's offices were not required to call us in if it was out of the hospital death. Since October of 2021, I worked with Dr. Rain and created a policy, if I can get to it. There we go. And anytime the coroner's office gets dispatched to a house for an on-scene death or an at-home death, if it meets certain criteria, they will call Gift of Hope, let us know that there has been a death, the circumstances of the death, next of kin information. That's the biggest thing, because in order for it to be a tissue donor, we have to know the patient's or the deceased medical and social history, because there are some automatic rule-outs. With those calls, since 2021, they've made 28 calls. 21 of them actually met our criteria, and we approached the family on. 10 of those actually became tissue donors. Conversion rate of 35%. The reason why I bring up conversion rate of 35%, because that is very important to see the outcome of them taking that extra step to call us to let us know. And you'll see it on the next slide. Lives saved or enhanced. On average, each tissue donor saves or enhances the lives up to 25 people. So that's 250 people's lives that are going to be affected by the work that the coroner's office has been doing just in the past year. I take that pretty personally. That's cool. There we go. If you look at the picture on the right, that's our entire service area. As I said, we cover 180 hospitals in that area, 12 million people. We work directly with 5,000 and up funeral directors. With all the other service areas, those are the numbers. And as you can see, the conversion rate with all the other counties is at 17%. McHenry County has stepped it up, and they've been doing a phenomenal job with that office. Some of the things that we do to support the families. There we go. Come on. When a family makes that decision or we move forward with that decision, we provide support throughout the entire process and in the future. Some of the things that we do, we create memory boxes. Every couple months, all our staff get together and put the boxes together. They have memory blankets, teddy bears, flag raising ceremonies, honor walks. What we'll do at the hospital, if they become an organ donor, we will do an honor walk. Has anyone participated in an honor walk before? I recommend it. It's very impactful. What they do is when they get transported from the ICU room to the operating room, they make an announcement over the PA system at the hospital. All staff line the hallways, and they kind of walk down the hallway all the way down with everybody, giving their moment of silence and prayer. We also do flag raising ceremonies. When during that time of the operation, the hospital will raise a Gift of Hope flag, so everybody that drives by knows that an organ donation is happening. We do plenty of events throughout the year. We've got National Donate Life Month, which is April. We got the National Minority Donate Life Month. We've got First Responders Month, which just ended. We did multiple flag raisings at multiple fire departments and police departments for staff that have become donors. So we do a lot in the outside public. I'm actually currently working with Dr. Rain in the coroner's office. We are going to be conducting a funeral director seminar to provide education for funeral directors that need credits to continue. So we're going to be doing that December 12th. And we've got, I believe, 40 people registered for it. So we do 2 or 3 of those throughout the year. So it's very important to get out there, talk to your families, let them know about if you're an organ donor or not. Look at our website if you're questioning it or what you've heard in the past. Any concerns, feel free to reach out. We always have people available to answer any questions. And I thank you for your time.
Do any board members have any questions for Tony? Seeing none? Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Next, we have the 2023 RTA Budget Presentation. Thanks for coming, Leanne and Brian.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate this opportunity. My name is Brian Sager from the City of Woodstock, and frankly, I'm humbled and honored by the most recent election. I look forward to joining your ranks of this esteemed body very, very soon. I also serve as the McHenry County representative to the Regional Transportation Authority Board of Directors, an honor that I've held for a few years now. And so we are here today to provide the annual report that is required, but also is most enjoyable for those of us on the RTA board regarding the efforts of the RTA and the impact that that has throughout McHenry County and throughout the region. So it's a real pleasure to be able to be here today to do that, and I thank you very much. We are blessed with a great board of directors who work very closely and collaboratively together, and we are absolutely grateful to have a stellar professional staff that leads us through all of the planning, all of the budgeting, and certainly all of the reporting that is necessary by state law for this particular authority. So it's my honor this morning to introduce you to the greatest executive director of any organization, and that is Executive Director Leanne Redden, who is the director of the Regional Transportation Authority of Chicago. Leanne.
Thank you, Director Saga. I don't know if I can live up to all of that, but I appreciate it. And thanks, Mr. Chairman and board members for including us today. I know you're going to be hearing more detail from PACE and Metra after my presentation, but I have to cover 2 things today, so I'm sort of begging a little extra indulgence. One, we have to cover the region's strategic plan that we have to do on the behalf of all the transit operators every 5 years, as well as the budget. So just you'll have to bear with me, just a little bit more information than I normally share with you on an annual basis. And I'm also joined by our interim CFO, Bill Lackman, and Anthony Safali from our government affairs team, who are also going to be here in a room just down the hall after this meeting if anybody wanted to do a deeper dive and have a bit more conversation. They're also available to the public if anyone wants to join us. So let's see if this is, yes, there we go. So I think, as you know, the transit system is operated by CTA, Metra, and PACE across our region, and they have all seen steady recovery over the past year or so. And you've probably heard me maybe say this, but it is worth repeating, that the transit system provided a significant lifeline during the pandemic. And our data shows that those riding during the darkest times of the pandemic were essential riders, people of color, and residents experiencing low incomes, and that was across the entire region. So it really was a lifeline, and we really respect and appreciate the role that our colleagues at the 3 service board operators provided in sustaining services during that tough time. So in close collaboration with the 3 service boards, the RTA has worked to provide stable funding to the entire transit system really for the last 48 years. But that includes the work that was done during the pandemic. And after the pandemic, we began a three-step recovery process that ended up allocating the $3 billion in federal relief monies that we received to this region and allocated them directly to CTA, Metra, and PACE to support their operations. This fall, we started to see ridership really hit I think a milestone, a sustained level of surpassing 1 million trips on an average weekday, and we hadn't seen numbers like that since 2019. So while ridership is still significantly down across the entire system, it is a pretty significant milestone, and if you're not ever on the bus or train, that's at least 1 million people or 1 million trips that aren't in the car in front of you on the highway. So I don't think I need to tell you guys that COVID changed everything, and specifically also changed a lot of things in the transit system. And the RTA and our partners have already began adapting through several ways, including service modifications, capital projects, new fare offerings across the region. For example, Metra's $100 monthly pass, and then the $30 regional Connect pass that all three operators are piloting right now. You'll probably hear a little bit more from that from the service boards in a few minutes. But we're also working on our forthcoming strategic plan that offers even more adaptation and improvement that is really meant to better the experience for all riders across the region. So I and my board and staff have spent the last 2 years focusing specifically on funding. And before I walk you through any of these numbers, I want to plainly say that the bottom line is that our systems funding model has become too reliant on fares. And like many of our peer regions around the country, we need to come to an agreement in this region that is less reliant on funding the operations of transit, that is less reliant on fares. Some of the details for the 2023 regional budget that totals $3.6 billion. On the left here, in the left pie chart, you'll see that they're the assumed revenue sources. The service board operating revenue, which comes from a combination of rider fares, which compromises right now of about 18% of the incoming revenues, a much smaller share than total revenue that we've had during normal operations pre-pandemic. And that is really largely due to the continued ridership loss across the entire system that was caused by the pandemic. Those fare revenue shortfalls have been replaced by the federal COVID relief funding that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And that comprises in this proposed budget of about 19% of the expected revenues for 23 operations. On the right-hand side of this pie chart, you will see the breakdown of the operating expenses by category. CTA comprises of just over half of the regional budget, followed by Metra, then PACE, suburban bus service, then the ADA paratransit service, and then there's a small sliver in there for the regional debt service that the RTA covers of dollars that we actually float for the rest of the region for the three operators as well to support them. The RTA's budget itself as an agency represents just about 1% of the overall regional expenses. So okay, good. I thought there was the same challenges that we were having. As we look to the future, we will see this over-reliance on fares is unsustainable. And so our finance teams from the RTA and the three service boards, as well as the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, we've worked together to create a 10-year financial plan that's really being used to inform our strategic planning work and our continued recovery work that we're currently working on. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. So the finance teams have met bi-weekly since April, and their work considers multiple factors. Our current 10-year financial plan, the current budget, scenario planning that was done with significant stakeholder input as part of our COVID recovery work, as well as our current budgets and the ridership projections for the future. And it's been supported by transportation financing experts with very deep experience to sort of help endorse that work and provide us other insights. We estimate that in 2026, we could have a regional transit deficit of more than $730 million annually, which is about 20% of the overall operating budget. And I want to underline that this, as I said, is an annual number. I know it's a significant number, but it assumes, and it also only, assumes the current levels of service with no significant changes to schedules, fares, or service. So the reason for this deficit is essentially twofold. First, that expenses are higher, And the Service Board's assumed expense growth is estimated at 3.9% per year, which is a little higher than we've experienced over the past decade. But in the near term, I think a couple of things I want to highlight. Inflation is certainly going to be a challenge, but labour is also really the dominant expense in the operations of the system. And that comprises of about 70% of the projected expenses. So attracting and retaining talent, not just an issue in the transit space. I know it's impacting businesses across the country, but I think everyone realizes that it's a serious ongoing problem for our industry, and it requires competitive compensation and benefits to the workers that we employ. And so I think that's kind of the simplest way to think about why the expenses are continuing to grow. The second reason for this deficit is that fewer people are riding the transit system than did in 2019. And we anticipate that the lasting impacts of the pandemic are going to continue to affect and impact people's commutes and travel patterns, such that we don't expect ridership to return to the pre-pandemic 2019 levels anytime in the coming years. So each agency is working tirelessly to bring back riders. We're not sort of throwing up our hands and ignoring it, but I think we have to have a dose of reality in some of those conversations. And we certainly hope that ridership comes back faster than we're currently anticipating and budgeting. But the fact remains that this is a large number, this deficit is a large number, and it only addresses, as I mentioned, the system as it operates today. And it doesn't consider improvements that I think many of us already know are needed. But we're not alone. I don't know if that's a comforting thought or not, but last month myself and the 3 executive directors from CTA, Metra and PACE all attended our national conference. And in some cases, we are slightly better off than some of our peers around the country. And not even just our peers, but large and small transit agencies across urban and rural areas are all experiencing similar challenges. And no one's really come up with that sort of magic bullet to sort of solve all the problems. But I want to highlight this today because I think it's important that understanding that the funding gap really is the major crisis that we are facing in the coming years. And we believe that improvements to the system, though, also must go hand in hand with solving the funding gap problem. So for the last year, we have been developing a plan that really essentially addresses both. And so just for a couple of minutes, I just want to highlight the work that we've been doing on developing our regional transit strategic plan. We've been very intentional about engaging, okay, the slide didn't advance. There we go. We've been very intentional about engaging stakeholders in our region, across the entire region, and really providing also transparent feedback loops back into the system as we've reached each milestone along the way. And this focus on broad engagement has resulted in the plan with direct input from hundreds and feedback from thousands of residents across the region. We recruited also more than 100 people from 70 organizations to take part in 5 working groups that met over 3 months to really develop the plan content. And I can say McHenry had some great representation. Scott Henning and a few others from the county have participated very actively in this work. And that we had 3 working groups focused on service, infrastructure, and then funding, and then 2 parallel technical working groups, mostly populated by the staff of the collective agencies, to work on both writing the plan and the financial outlook and capital project programming. County staff, as I mentioned, we've also engaged other county staff and met with the chairman to talk through some of this work, and ongoing one-on-one conversations continue. We've had public surveys that have garnered input from thousands of residents. And we've joined events across the region, community festivals. You see a couple of pictures up here, to meet people where they're at, tell us what they think about the transit system, what they do and don't like, whether they ride it or not, to help us gather that input. And we've shared that input that we've gathered transparently with our board on a regular basis, but also through social media and other avenues that we communicate with the region. What really for us began as broad engagement really ended up in a process of co-creating this plan. And we've been gratified by the overwhelming support, not just for the process that we embarked on by getting a lot more input, but also the commitment and the interest in sustaining and supporting transit into the future. So we're now gathering input and working on the practical next steps on 14 areas that really form what we refer to as our agenda for advocacy and action. And these really came from these working groups. The advocacy list shown here on that slide includes really longer-term substantive changes that really can impact our transit system and really help us work to create a better transit system across the region. But it includes changes that the RTA and the 3 service boards can't do on our own, and really going to require broader engagement and strong support as we look to think about sort of this sustainable funding transit for the future, as well as helping us develop a budget that is less reliant, as I mentioned, on fair revenue, and instead, though, focusing on access to the transit system. And we really need to, as I mentioned, do this collectively by building a coalition from the stakeholders that we have around sort of highlighting the value that the transit system brings to the entire region. And our plan that will come out in a couple of weeks will offer a lot more details on how we plan to specifically accomplish this, but we also see each county as a critical partner for us going forward. So the next set of action items shown on this slide are things that the RTA and the service boards can more directly lead and affect themselves, but with support from stakeholders. And these priorities also came directly from the working groups. None of these, even on this list, are easy to accomplish, but we think there are steps that we can take in the very immediate future to advance all of them across that list. And it includes taking steps that'll make the system safer and more secure, certainly something we heard very loudly and clearly through our work. Also to make paying for transit more seamless and affordable, accelerate our transition to near zero emissions, while prioritising communities that have been burdened by poor air quality, and also adapting to the changing needs of riders and others across the entire region. So we will release a draft plan in early December for public comment, and that plan then will ultimately be considered by the region's RTA board in early February. But we see engagement in this effort continuing through both the adoption and into implementation. So I want to just specifically note that we'll have a December 7 virtual public hearing where we will be inviting stakeholders we've worked with to co-create this plan, as well as other members across the public to hear and comment both about the plan as well as the budget. We're going to have RTA staff from departments there to answer, specific questions and discuss the work as well. And we hope that this hearing will be well attended, informative, and interactive as well. Any of you who would be willing to share that date, we can provide you more information, but sharing it on your social media channels, etc., to help us get the word out is going to be critical for us as well. We'll follow up the adoption of both the budget and the plan with some immediate action items that I mentioned, including a region-wide advocacy campaign, really focusing on opportunities with the coalition that we have built to continue to work with us as we look to improve and enhance the transit system, but as well start to address this funding gap. So I welcome any thoughts from you today that you may have. We'll continue meetings throughout this fall and into the winter, and we're happy to schedule any smaller group discussions with you if you have any more detailed questions. Just one quick thing I have to conclude with to meet the budget numbers, because I know you probably care more about sort of the specific operators, but the overall summary of the region's budget, and just for clarity, the regional budget is essentially the compilation of the 4 agencies' budgets. The proposed 2023 regional operating budget is approximately $3.6 billion, which is an increase of 6% over 2022. The 6 county systems' proposed 5-year capital program totals $5.7 billion, which is almost 9% greater, and that's a good thing, than the 22 through 26 budget that we have had running now. And that's largely because of the increase in the infusion of federal formula monies and discretionary funds from the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act passed earlier this year. This year. On November 17, service boards will present their budgets to the RTA Board of Directors And then there's, as I mentioned, they're scheduled, the full board is scheduled to vote on the budget at our December meeting. So I just want to thank you for your generous attention and your indulgence for a little bit longer of a presentation. And as I mentioned, happy to answer any questions. I'll hand it back to the chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Vijek?
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The virtual public hearing is December 7th. Will that be in the daytime or in the evening?
The hours are 4 to 6, I believe. We can get you more detailed. So it sort of spans the end of the workday if someone was in a professional setting that wanted to participate, and into the evening. And we'll have, actual breakout rooms too available for people if they want to focus on a specific area or topic as well. We can provide you through Peter or whatever, or the chairman's office, we can provide you actually the details on all that and the links as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay.
It will also all be posted on the RTA's website as well, full direct links into those meetings.
Mr. Scala?
Thank you, Leanne, for the presentation. I'm curious, as the parent agency over the other agencies, with the ridership being roughly about half of what it was pre-pandemic, I guess my concern is that I don't see that increasing, in the sense that as a state we're relatively close to full employment, so commuting trends are, I think, kind of where we're at and where they will be going forward. I know that you had talked a lot about not relying on fare revenue in order to supplement the budget. But, when I do take public transportation, obviously it is very comfortable because there isn't a lot of people sitting around me. And so it's a situation where I think that the paradigm shift needs to start happening with the sibling agencies as to what that's going to look like moving forward. It seems challenging to have Metra trains that are 8 long, and some of them have 5-6 people on them. It's challenging to have CTA running the schedule that they're running and have cars literally with nobody in them. And so, the problem that I see is that the community itself, and I'm saying community meaning the whole regional area, has a level of expectation about ridership, but that level of expectation doesn't necessarily meet what the needs are. And the needs are not only for day-to-day operations, but ongoing operations like and I'm sure we're going to hear from Metra and PACE, and if CTA was here, we'd hear from CTA about all their capital needs that they have and the rolling stock that they have to continue to try and keep up and maintain, which gets more and more expensive. So to me, the conversation, and maybe these conversations are going on, but the conversation needs to be happening about what is the expectation level that the community has of transit, and how do we support that in its current form, or do we change what that looks like so that we can meet the needs but also be able to afford the needs? I mean, we're at a situation right now where we're getting a lot of government money coming in order to support what is currently the paradigm, but obviously the paradigm is never coming back, and so that reality has to take effect. I mean, it really is. I mean, I don't see ridership ever getting back to pre-pandemic levels. I read passenger transport. They have articles and articles and articles in there about not only our region, but all the regions, like you said, that are having this issue. And so it becomes more than just our regional issue. It becomes a national issue. And are we going to have government support and help fund public transit?
So you're right. Yes, you're correct. I mean, all the points that you raised are the big issues that we're grappling with. And I kept it very high level of the elements of the strategic plan. They are all the questions that we have been talking about, and not just talking amongst ourselves, but talking, as I mentioned, to a broad base of stakeholders, working with the business community, employers, etc. You're right. Ridership is it would be naive of us to assume that ridership is coming back to pre-pandemic levels. And actually, we were seeing that decline of ridership somewhat pre-pandemic with the technology that people had, the ability to work remotely, work flexibly, things like that. So the COVID only sort of sped that up exceptionally. And I think that they're the big questions. When you see the plan that comes out, you'll see that there's, what we've tried to do is identify kind of both those challenges that need to change and the way the transit system needs to change to respond to both what the travel patterns are, what the funding needs are. But I think that the benefits and the role of a large transit network that we have, and it's 3 different operators operating under very different physical and operational styles and very different ridership bases as well. There is a critical element to that I think we've heard loudly and clearly, at least to date from the region, is important to be sustained. And where do we find that sort of balancing point is the work that doing this plan is really just sort of step one. And it'll address a whole list of both sort of operations, funding, capital. How does the transit system need to change and adapt going forward to be a transit system post-pandemic in this different working environment that we have? I think there's a lot more people that have come back to riding, and especially if you're riding a Metra train and you're only seeing 5 or 6 people, I'm guessing you're on a Friday. I'm kidding. But if you're there on a Monday, a Tuesday through Thursday, my trains are pretty packed, and I mean they're almost as crowded as they were pre-pandemic. There's changing travel patterns. The weekend ridership is actually significantly higher and is actually rebounded back to pre-pandemic levels, and in some cases even stronger. So sort of balancing out all those changing travel patterns, work patterns, technology, is all the stuff that we have to try to execute over the coming years. And that's what we're attempting to sort of capture within that plan, commit to as a region, while we have that parallel conversation about what does that funding need look like and how are we going to sustain what I've heard loudly and clearly from the region is a base level of transit that people do still need and want as an economic driver. For in many cases, as we saw in the pandemic. So some of us had the luxury and the benefit of being to stay home and stay safe. It was the essential workers, doctors, nurses, janitors, food service people, supermarket workers that were actually riding the transit system to keep us sort of going. So that, I hope you'll take a look at the plan when it comes out in early December, and I hope it begins to sort of, for you at least, show the path that we're charting forward to try to address those big issues.
Thank you.
Ms. Althoff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Leanne.
Hello.
The question that I'm specifically asking follows that. When you talk about finding increased funding elsewhere, are you also including local participation, or is that from a federal and state level, or are you just investigating all of those options? I wanted to be clear if that's what you're saying to us, that the board knows that that's what you're saying to us.
So I think I like to sort of jokingly say we are equal opportunity for all sources of revenue. But I recognize, for example, counties are actually going to have some of the same financial challenges when the federal relief monies run out as well. Honestly, some of the conversations, there's some nexus to transportation. We are the taxing authority for the region. There is very likely going to be conversations with Springfield about what does that funding mix look like? Is the state stepping up? Are we raising any taxes? I don't have all those answers because they're not really just questions, and you understand this as well as anybody, they're not things that sort of we can, even in our region, sort of wave that wand and sort of impact and change. It has to be done in partnership. Federal government funding is certainly a conversation that we're having nationally about is there an appetite or an interest in ongoing federal support for the transit system? Just to clarify, I know this is super weedy, but like the federal government has historically not provided any operational funding for transit nationwide. And the monies that the federal government provide are very much segmented for capital and construction projects. So pandemic was really the first time in probably should know the year, like 30, 40 years since the federal government had provided any money on the operating side. So there are conversations, but I know some of the conversations have come up too within county discussions that I've had across the region that if we're approaching Springfield, for example, do we actually collectively approach them and sort of say it's not just a funding gap for transit that we're trying to fix, are we trying to talk about what is the funding model for all sorts of local and regional services? So more conversation.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you. Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
Carol.
that's okay, thank you. And actually, it's more of a comment than a question, but I think as you try to figure out how to make ridership easier for people, I think that we as a county and our municipalities have to remember that we're also part of the equation, which is as we continue to develop our neighborhoods and our communities, that we do it in a way that makes it possible for public transportation to be available to our residents. So I think that's a big part of it as well.
yeah, you hit on a key point. That's sort of what falls under the bucket of our advocacy items because it's working with our partners at CMAP, and I know Carolyn is very involved in those conversations. We talk about these kinds of things a lot, but at the local level and trying to create policies and plans that make a more transit-friendly market. So PACE, and I know the county's done, under some of Scott and Peter's leadership, have done a lot of work on revamping the community-based services and how do we sort of better support and partner and think more creatively about how we provide those services too.
Dr. Jensen.
Well, I was a former village trustee in Lake in the Hills. And my take on it is that, first of all, we need to find a way for different municipalities to be a part of that partnership that is affordable within their village or city. Secondly, it gets back to road design and making it multimodal, and also how municipalities design their communities as far as expansion with residential in concert with business. And I'm quite a fan of Myron Orfield, who talks about metropolitan development, and we develop from the inside out, not from the outside in. And when we start developing from the outside, then we have scattered, uneven development, and that gets into how we configure transportation issues. And in this county, I believe there's been a lack of connectivity of getting people from one place to another. And the assumption is that we get people from a spoke system instead of a circular kind of getting one place to another. Let's say getting people from here to another local municipality that's 20 or 40 miles away. So don't you think there are problems as far as finding common ground with municipalities and other governmental entities to create a more sustainable economic model that they can embrace?
I think there's opportunities to do that. And I think some good work has happened. I mean, it's music to my ears. I'm actually not a transit person. I'm a planner by background. And so sort of the nexus between land use and transportation is absolutely critical. I think it has to happen sort of, yes, at the local level. Some of the work that we do helps sort of support and local municipalities think through how can they develop land use to be more transit friendly and transit supportive, and not just the bigger sort of TOD things around Metra stations and hubs, but even at the community, the suburban neighborhood level. But there is a role, I think, for the region to sort of play in and support that. So I think that there's plenty of opportunities, sort of from big policy side of things down to, where we're building, how and where we're building sidewalks to connect even within a neighborhood to get to that PACE bus stop or that shopping center or, so I think that is, yes, I will agree with you because I think there's plenty of opportunities for all of us to do more and better with the money we're spending.
And I'm really glad that we have all RTA, Metra, and PACE here today because we've been working very closely, and we'll hear about it very shortly with PACE on improving some of the services in some of our municipalities. And we've been working very, very closely on those items.
Absolutely. I didn't want to steal any of their thunder, so they can share with you their ideas. too.
Prequel.
Thanks.
Thank you, Leanne. Next, we have the Metra budget presentation. Mr. Kaler.
Yeah, if I can work it. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Thank you, Chairman Bueller and the entire county board and county staff and other agencies and a few of the public that we have here today. It was great really to have RTA start out. It set the stage. At Metra, we've been talking about sustainability for more than several years, and it's certainly a concern that really was highlighted when the pandemic came around. So the awareness, the funding that we received from the federal government that was a lot different than we'd received before because it helped with operations. And if without that money, quite honestly, I don't believe that Metra would be operating many trains at all, if any, today. So right now that was important. I'd like to start out, first of all, everybody got, I think, one of our books at their desk, so please take your time and when you have a chance to read through that. It's just a bunch of highlights. But I wanted to start the conversation today with some comments that our executive director, Jim Derwinski, has just recently made to the press. They're not new comments, but they're important, I think. It starts out with the week of March 5th, 2020, which we all, I think, remember very well. When we admitted there was a pandemic, even though there was one probably going on for 3 months prior to that or even longer. He said the ridership tumbled and it went down from the 100% of numbers that we had at the time down to 15%. So if you rode the train then, Mr. Scala, that's, I mean, 2 or 3, 5, 6 people on a train. That's what it amounted to. Metra, before that, provided 74 million rides in the year 2019. So we used the year 2019 pretty much as our baseline in everything we do. But 74 million. Last year, let's see, excuse me, the plan, at least in our thinking, is when we reach out to the year 2025, we might be lucky to have around 50 to 52 million people, or rides, I should say. So, Mr. Scala, everything that you said, you know, we're looking at, and unfortunately, we think it's going to be reality. For Metra, we used to have what we called our snow days, which we called Metra days. And when we had a large accumulation of snow, people that would maybe drive chose to take the train because they knew it was going to be a 10-hour commute in total. We don't feel we're going to have those Metra days anymore because people now are used to using electronics and staying at home and being able to use that rather than commuting in. So I think our Metra days are gone. Our strong days right now are Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Very little people on either Mondays or Fridays, although I understand Mondays might be increasing a little bit. So as Leanne, and I really appreciate your presentation, Leanne, pointed out, it's all about sustainability and changing our funding mechanisms. With the COVID dollars that we have covering our ticket revenue loss, which was huge, especially when we had the UP not even collecting tickets for over a year, large amounts of money, that we did not have. The money that we've gotten from CARES money, we've been very careful with. And the unfortunate news is it's going to run out in about 2 years. So it's a definite situation where alternate funding sources need to be found, or we will be having less trains, and eventually it could trickle down to no trains at all. So it's a serious situation. The good news, if there is a good news, is that due to some efforts, and actually some of this came out of McHenry County years ago with Senator Durbin working together, we're now receiving additional sales tax money from all of the internet sales. What does that translate to for Metra? It's about somewhere between $2.7 and $3 million a month more money. Okay, not a lot of money, but it's significant when you don't have ticket sales. So, and if you saw the slide that Leanne had put up, you could see that sales tax revenue is the main funder of the operations side of Metra. The question that's going to come up, and it's going to come up tomorrow in a board meeting that I will representing McHenry County at, is in our budget, which way are we going to go? Are we going to go with what we call the super saver? Leanne mentioned that. It's the $6, $10, and $100 pass, which I want to be honest with you, has not seemed to increase ridership. A little bit on the weekends for people that want to go, several times a month. It's a good deal. But in reality, it really hasn't increased ridership. So we have to look at the models based on, do we go back to the old system where we have many zones on each line, or do we come to a simple system such as this one right now that offers 3 opportunities? There's actually more. It's very complicated to get into, and I'm not going to get into it. So with that being said, I'm going to let our new CFO, John Morris, do the presentation on the budget. Don't be surprised if I don't chime in, because there are some things that concern me as we go through it. But it is very difficult to put together a budget when you don't know what your ridership is going to be. And we're looking for next year, starting out at 45% of what we had before, and maybe getting up to 55%. So I think we're going to be happy with 50. We've heard 50 thrown around. On our best day so far, I think we've hit about 48%. I could be wrong. We might have gone over 50, but not on a regular basis. So with that, I will introduce Mr. John Morris, our CFO, to present the budget. John, yeah, thank you. The clicker? Oh, yeah, I'll let you click.
All right, thank you, Director Kaler. Members of the board, members of the public, thank you for this opportunity to present. What I'd like to go over is our proposed operating budget for 2023 and plan to go through to 2025. So 2024 and 2025 as projections. So the first thing we're going to talk about is that our proposed operating budget, the expenses, is going to be $980 million. And we're looking at, to be able to fund that, some different pricing options. The most likely option that's going to be accepted is not the first one. It's in the bullet, which is a reversion to our previous fare system where the monthly pass was based on zones, with the difference being that the passes would all be less expensive. So in the past, they were about 23 times the price of a one-way. It would be reduced to 16 times the price of a one-way. Most likely, we're going to retain the structure that we're running with right now, which is the $6 and $10 pass and the $100 monthly super saver across all zones. Actual decision will be by the board, as Director Kaler mentioned, tomorrow, which direction that they're going to go. The budget for expenses is about 9% higher, and that's generally due to basically two things: inflation and also fuel expenses. We are also looking to, when we say anticipate a return to pre-pandemic service levels, that doesn't mean run the exact same schedules as in 2019, but we're attempting to offer the same amount of service, but with the schedule adjusted for commuting patterns. So people trying to leave earlier, leave during the midday, so the trains might be more spread out for that. For 2023, we're looking at basically expecting about 40%, which is about where we're running right now. Start the year at 40% of pre-pandemic levels of service, and then we expect a gradual increase up to 55% by the end of the year. What that's going to give us is $216 million of system-generated revenue. Most of that is fare revenue, and plus we get additional revenue when we do advertisements, rental of some of our facilities, and also we do work for other agencies using the Metra workforce.
Jan, it didn't move up.
Oh. Oh, there you go. Oh, I pushed it too far. All right. Apologies. These never like me. All right, continue. Okay, that's correct. Okay. All right, so $216 million in system-generated revenue, and then really the backbone of the budget is the $523.6 million in sales taxes. As Director Kaler mentioned, that's boosted up because we can collect sales taxes on internet sales now. And that gives us a hole of about $240 million. That hole is going to be covered by our balance, part of our balance of federal COVID relief money. And we received about $1.1 billion, and we're going to have about $599 million at the end of this year. That's going to have to last us. Ideally, it will last us into 2026, but most likely it's going to terminate about the end of 2025. Okay. Capital budget, we're looking to spend about $500 million in capital. Most of that's going to be for large-scale projects, some of which consumers will see, riders will see: station reconstruction, $120 million, rail car rehabilitation, $71 million, and the rest are going to be more infrastructure, backside changes, with the exception of the ticket vending machines, which will be rolled out to all stations. All right. We're going to fund the capital budget. Okay, thank you. $250 million is going to come from the federal government through formula funding. $31 million is going to be congestion and air quality mitigation. $74 million is going to come through the state as pay-go funds. That's where they're funding us on an annual basis. $12 million on multimodal bond funding. And then we're going to get $500,000 from the Department of Commerce, from the state, $5 million from Cook County, and $130 million in RTA bonding. Overall, our 5-year capital plan is nearly $2 billion. And again, that's rehabilitation of stations, refurbishing the rolling stock, that's the cars and the locomotives, repairing bridges, as well as maintaining the trackage. One of the important things for us is trying to be more green. So one of our initiatives is to try battery-powered locomotives. What we've done is we've approved a plan to convert 6 of our oldest and thus least efficient locomotives and convert them to zero-emission battery power. So we're going to have Project Rail. First, they're going to do 3, and we have the option to do 3 more, and they're going to cost basically $35 million to do all 6. And we're expecting it's going to take 3.5 years to do this. And we're looking at these should be able to duplicate the function of normal locomotives, including going up to 79 miles an hour and being able to do a complete trip on a battery charge. And we'll have charging stations at the end of the route, both ends. Another highlight that we have, we always like to show our new rolling stock. We just spent $70 million, $71 million to buy 15 remanufactured locomotives. And we see a picture of the first one that we received last month. And the advantage of the new locomotives is we get newer locomotives. They're more fuel efficient and more emission friendly than the ones that they're replacing. So we're trying to, again, do our duty for the environment. I'm sorry. There. Last thing we'll talk about is improvements that impact McHenry County. One of the ones that gets a lot of attention is the Woodstock Yard. We're looking to create a new yard that's going to handle 14 trains. And what that's going to do is that's going to reduce our need to store trains at Crystal Lake and Barrington. And it's going to allow our trains to stop at stations northwest of Barrington instead of idling in the downtown areas. That's going to cost about $2.1 million. The other thing of interest in McHenry County is modernizing and upgrading the Lake Street interlocker at the north end of the Ogilvie transportation system. And what this is going to do is, by replacing track and switches and other infrastructure, it's going to allow more efficient entry and exit from Ogilvie, which will speed up and improve the reliability of train service. I mentioned before ticket vending machines, and what we're going to do is we're spending $70 million to buy and service electronic ticket vending machines at every station. I know people know that the ticket agents are not at the stations all of the time, particularly if you're a reverse commuter. So there'll be a ticket vending machine that'll allow you to buy tickets. There'll be 650 machines. They'll be at every station. And we're going to put in 225 machines that in the first phase. And the second phase will make sure that all 242 stations have at least one vending machine. We expect to start in the middle of 2022 and finish by the end, about a year later. Stations that'll be in the first phase in McHenry County will be Cary and the Crystal Lake downtown stations. Are there any questions?
Ms. Altoff?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I know that when there were earlier talks with Metra, moving the yard to Woodstock, there was also discussion about moving a lot of the maintenance there too. And I know that the city of Crystal Lake had some massive concerns with regard to what was going to happen to that current area that they use. Is that included? And if it's not, I would just look at Mr. Kaler and say that I just know from past experiences that property and that land, just because it too runs through and along Main Street, and that always was an issue. So I would just kind of ask if there's been any conversation or if there's any thought about what happens to that particular property.
So, Pam, you remember the discussions that we had. They all revolve around the UP. So the area that you're talking about is totally Union Pacific. And right now, Metra's in negotiations with the UP to take over the people moving part of the UP. These have been long discussions. They want to hit us up with some big money for trackage rights. And we're saying we just want to make it initially start out so there's no cost to either one of us. It's, cost neutral, and we're having trouble working with them. But the answer to your question is unfortunately no. That's with the UP, and the city of Crystal Lake needs to, maybe ramp up a little bit of their concerns about it. So what we were talking about are the trains that are stacked going northwest, and that would at least eliminate the noise issues and allow for better maintenance. The important thing, the idea of having a Woodstock yard has been on the books for a little while. We've talked with the county. You've come up with some money to help initially fund that. We have some land that's identified, but because of the NEPA process with the federal government, we just can't go and jump steps forward. We have to go through this process. So as you saw on the slide, we're allocating $2.1 million out of our budget for next year to help fund monies to begin this NEPA process and speed it up. We've already allocated a little over $2 million from last year's budget, 2022's budget, to that. So we've got about $4 million, and we have gone out on the street to solicit bids for a firm to come in and work through that process. So I'm excited from the fact that we've got that far, because the NEPA process is not an easy one, and we're going to move forward with that. Once we've got that, then we can seek more federal funding and whatever to build the yard, because it's going to be probably over $1 million for that yard. But the interesting thing, you see in Crystal Lake, they're building some new housing complex, which is about a 4 to 5 minute walk to the train station. That's what we like to see. Fox River Grove, another project. And I understand Cary is looking at some projects similar to that. And Woodstock, for years, has wanted to begin to develop the downtown area and make it more friendly for people that want to commute. And they've got a lot of plans. If this train yard comes into fruition, it's going to make a big difference. And it also, I don't know how many of you take the train, but I certainly, when I go in, I try to take an express train and not a milk run. It's a little over an hour on an express from Crystal Lake. A milk run is about an hour and 20 minutes, maybe even more. So the more express trains that we can have coming out of McHenry County makes it more feasible for people to want to live in McHenry County, and they can tolerate that schedule difference where, yeah, maybe you got to sit around the train station for 20 minutes before your train goes, but at least your quality of life is going to be better than spending that time, on the interstate. So I think that part of, future thinking is there. And right now, as Leanne Redden had said, it's all about sustainability. And in our future budgets, by 2026, we're going to have at least a $50 million deficit, so that we're going to have to try to fill that. RTA is working hard at coming up with a mechanism to do that. We know that we'll be lucky to come back with 70% ridership. So I'm sorry I went off on a tangent.
No, actually, May I, Mr. Chair? Sure. Just, so is the idea now, though, for Metra to focus in on our existing infrastructure as opposed to planning, which we've talked for 100 years about expanding into Huntley and dealing with that additional line that runs through McHenry? Are those plans much further out now because of what we're dealing and grappling with financially? Are we really just going to focus in on what we have in place?
Well, that's a real interesting question, because right now, we haven't been told who might get the operation of the rail that they want to go out to Rockford. So it could be Amtrak, it could be Metra. We don't know. Now, that's going to be a costly proposition. There's no way that Metra can even remotely begin to handle the infrastructure costs. So if it doesn't come with somebody picking up that bill, there's no way that we can do it. But the other side of that is, once you have the infrastructure, the operating costs. So, you know, it's something that I think is going to happen. But again, it's all about funding. And I think we'll be one of the two people that might do that. So Huntley would get either Amtrak or Metra in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Althoff. Dr. Jensen?
Thank you, Ken. I used to commute back and forth to my job on Metra, and former board member of United Way, and Ellen DeVita was the economic or the community development director in Mount Prospect. And they've done a good job as far as doing housing opportunities along the line. And it was to encourage people to live downtown Mount Prospect and also encourage people for using transit. And I thought they'd done a very remarkable job doing that. And I'm going to tell a funny story. And it's probably off track, but this is one of my last meetings, so please indulge me. So my husband got me the tickets to the Doobie Brothers. Now, I thought the Doobie Brothers was a real family name, right? The Doobie. And how many of you know what a doobie is? You don't have to generationally inform me, but I really thought it was the Doobie family. And my dear friend, Mr. Nowak, set me straight. He's out of the room, so I can call him out. So I'm embarrassed to know that I now know what a doobie is. So we go down to the Doobie Brothers.
Yeah, there's the informer,
Nowak. He knows what a doobie is. I had no clue. So we get down to Chicago, and of course it was a late concert. And we wanted to take the Metra back. And that meant we would have to be down there for 2 hours to wait to get back. So my husband, in his infinite wisdom, he said, let's get a limo. So we hired a limo to get from Chicago back to Pingree. And so it gets back to the convenience of using Metra for people going down to the city for other, activities, whether it's the theater or going to the Doobie Brothers. And I think that's a problem as far as scheduling and trying to make it convenient for people on weekends that want to use the system and then get back on a timely basis instead of being on the train until 2 or 3 in the morning, So what's your response to that? I mean, if you want to make it palatable or convenient, don't you think some of those time frames on the scheduling is important?
We get a little bit money from the hotels down there to be for doing that.
That's a whole nother issue.
No, that's
That's a whole nother issue, because they were charging $1,000 a night to get a hotel
right.
for some of these you know,
No. Paul, it is a problem.
I'm making light of it, but I think it is something to really think about how we utilize the metro system. And I'm one person that really supports transit, but, you know.
Yeah, we are constantly monitoring, you know, ridership and where people originate from and where they go
Yeah.
to. But the night trains on weekends are difficult. It's a matter of crews and how many people we have. Right now, we are having, just like everybody else, the people problem and hiring people to just, you know, functionally run the trains. So, you know, we look at this constantly though. And, you know, I'll tell them, next time there's a Doobie concert though, we'll add a couple trains just to make sure we can cover the crowds that are making that
Is that
trip.
a funny story or not? And then I have my dear friend here who enlightened me.
Yeah, thank you for enlightening us with the Doobies.
All right, well, maybe after the meeting, Paul, you can tell me what a doobie is, because I have no idea. Mr. Acosta.
We got a couple more.
Yeah, I just had a question about the vending machines. I mean, realistically, if the vending machine idea really takes off, I mean, could that possibly result in any worker displacements? I know when I switch from Metra to CTA, I mean, if you don't have a Ventra card, you're kind of screwed, because I never see a ticketing agent in a CTA station anymore.
Yeah, well, you know, as far as people placement, again, most of the people that were ticket agents, to my knowledge, we've found other positions for them within Metra, or they've retired. They've, you know, reached the age that they could retire. So I don't think we're displacing too many people. What we are is increasing the efficiency of being able to get people to actually have a ticket, not selling as many tickets on the train so that the conductor can actually handle the safety that he's supposed to be handling, he or she is supposed to be handling. And then we have a lot of ticket evasion, and we really feel that using the ticket machines might improve that. Now, that has to be proved to me, because I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work, but by far, they're going to be more efficient. We will have less back office cash handling and all this kind of stuff. So we think it's the right way to go. That's the way most of the rail systems are. In regard to the CTA, you know, you've heard that there's a pass now if you take Metra and you're doing it on a regular basis. There's a $30 pass that you can get that will, you know, get you off on CTA.
Okay, that was just my only question.
Yeah. And pace too, yeah, sorry. Any more?
Ms. Meshes?
Thank you. I assume you were being facetious when you said the hotels are giving you a kickback, but it actually made me think. First, do say it was not real, right? It was a joke.
Absolutely not real.
But I'm going to be an idiot now because I just got the election results are in. Is there a way to close? Is there a way to do more partnerships with industry so that they're taking care of some of this budget shortfall you have? So for instance, when I do go on the train, my kids invariably will start asking me to give them stuff, right? You could maybe get like vending machines and charge companies to put in like these drinks or whatnot, right? And that's what I'm thinking about. Have you thought about trying to get some partnerships and then charging fees to vendors?
Not to my knowledge, not in that direction.
Yeah.
We've had some help with some industry out on the North UP line, because we set up some reverse commute, and that was done, you know, pre-pandemic. So obviously, once people started working from home, we weren't seeing the efficiencies in that move. But we did get help with some money from that general area to put in some switching that we had to put in that would have cost Metra, you know, maybe $30–50 million. And I don't remember exactly how much the help was, but there was some monies that came to, you know, help offset that. That's not the answer, I don't think, that you were looking for.
I mean, are there laws that are things that impede you from making partnerships with private companies?
not, I mean, only in the way of advertising or, you know, those type of things.
Okay. All right, well, trying to always figure out how to fix budget shortfalls is kind of
Oh,
a
I
thing
agree with
lately.
you.
Right, okay.
No, thank you for those comments.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Jensen, do you have another question, or are you still on from before?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Acosta?
I did actually have another question. And you had touched on it a little bit, but I was curious if you could give us kind of a little bit more information on what is happening with the negotiations with the UP and their decision to kind of disinvest themselves of Metra stations and whatnot. And at this point, are you budgeting for anything, or is it still too early to tell?
Well, I mean, we have ongoing discussions with the UP, from what I'm told, several times a month at different levels. Sometimes people come in from Omaha. That's going to be a higher level discussion. As far as the stations goes, you know, we have no desire or funding to purchase stations. I think it was very smart of both Cary and Crystal Lake to purchase the stations that they did, because now they've got control. And those are certainly areas in the community that are centric to the functions of the downtown area. So I think those were wise decisions. Some others don't make any sense at all, and I think they just threw it out as kind of a threat that, you know, you might have all this development coming in, and Metra, you should buy these. And, you know, we're not that dumb that we would fall for that. So in some cases, it made sense. You know, and again, as I mentioned, with Cary, Fox River Grove, Crystal Lake, you know, they've got some housing that's being built in walking distance, and Woodstock's got so much opportunity. So, you know, when we get the yard, it's going to make a big difference to the economic vitality of McHenry County and getting people, you know, downtown.
Just to follow up, I mean, at this point, the UP has not given any firm timelines on when.
Oh, no. You know, it's an ongoing arm bending, you know, it could get nasty. We've tried not to be nasty, but we feel that we should do this on a level field, because when they start charging what they want to charge, it would be very hard to probably operate the northwest line, maybe, you know, the west line. There's a lot of factors involved, but
Okay.
it'd be the best thing for Metra, though, to be able to do that. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none.
yeah, well, I would encourage anyone that wants to take a trip downtown to see Metra. A few of the board members have done that. Chairman's done that. We're always open and want to do that. The other thing is our contest, poster contest for all the grade schools and the high schools is coming up. It kicks off in December, and it has to be in by, I think, January 22nd. So I'm encouraging you to talk to your schools and promote that if you could. We'd appreciate that. So thank you for your indulgence.
Yeah, I'll just add that that's a great trip. I think once we get the new board seated here, we'll organize another one, and it's great to see how you guys really take efficiency and cost savings seriously.
Thank you. And I'll try to get somebody that goes in the head car so they can actually be up by the engineer. We had a few people do that. It's something to see.
Thank you. Next, we have the 2023 PACE budget presentation.
Good morning. I do not have a presentation. I'm going to keep this a little bit more informal, but I want to say good morning to you, Chairman Bueller, and to all of the members of the board, and also congratulate those who were reelected or newly elected to the board. My name is Erin Smith, and I represent McHenry County on the PACE Suburban Bus Board. I'm going to start today first by thanking the county, this board, as well as the Department of Transportation for terrific partnership between PACE and McHenry County. And a lot of the updates that I'll provide today wouldn't be possible without the strong partnership. I'm going to start today with a ridership update, as my colleagues have for Metra and RTA. PACE is in a different situation, and our ridership is rebounding a little bit more quickly. And that's predominantly because we're not as impacted by the hybrid work environment as Metra. The ridership at PACE are riders who are taking the bus to a doctor's appointment, to the hospital. They are essential workers, they're students. And for our riders, PACE is their only commuting option. So we were in slightly better shape, although still significantly impacted during COVID. But now our ridership is up to about 65% of pre-COVID levels. And our paratransit in 2023 should be at 100% of pre-COVID levels. So we're in a little bit better position. As we move towards historic capital improvements and service innovation and continued ridership recovery, I'm really pleased to report that we have for 2023 a fully balanced budget, which fully funded at $303.4 million operating budget for fixed route, a strong capital plan totaling $72.3 million, and no fare increases. The budget for regional paratransit service is also balanced at $238.5 million, and that covers the cost of providing paratransit trips for both Chicago and the suburbs. We're expecting about a 6.8% growth in paratransit ridership, and that's what will bring us to 100% of pre-COVID levels. We have a number of exciting developments throughout the region. Our strategic vision plan, Driving Innovation, which was approved in September 2021, is really guiding all of our decisions, including the budget that I'm presenting today. So I'm going to touch on a number of those, and I'll start with electrification. PACE has made a commitment to operate a fully zero-emission fleet by the year 2040. And that was a commitment that was not in the original vision. It's an aggressive commitment. But with feedback from our citizens and from the Departments of Transportation, including direct feedback from McHenry County, we've made a commitment and are now moving towards a fully electric fleet by 2020. That starts with this year's budget, and of the over $72 million in capital infrastructure, $60 million will go towards our North Division in Waukegan, where we will build the first. We're building the first electric garage, and this is a foundational project for electrifying the entire region. In line with our zero-emission plan, the PACE North Division in Waukegan will operate a fully electric bus fleet by the year 2026. And that sets us up for fully electric fleets and zero emissions in the remaining regions. So while that capital investment is not in McHenry County, it sets us up for something that's very important from the feedback we've gotten to McHenry County residents. We've also been awarded a contract to buy 20 more electric buses, which will be delivered to PACE mid-2023. And that's ahead of schedule, and it's ahead of schedule, and I'll give credit to PACE leadership and staff, because they were able to kind of jump ahead in the line by taking advantage of excess capacity that was existing in another contract in another state. Otherwise, it would have taken us a lot longer to get those buses. So we're thrilled to have 20 electric buses coming in. And we're hopeful that one of the congressional community project funding projects that was in the 2023 appropriations bill and passed the U.S. House earlier in the year will make it to the final bill. And then there are 5 electric paratransit buses for our garage in Elgin, which serves northern Kane County and southern McHenry County. So we are ahead of schedule, and that's exciting. A couple of other updates on capital. On Randall Road, we've completed the work on 8 new bus shelters in Algonquin and Lake in the Hills, Each of the shelters has a solar-powered bus tracker sign to offer up-to-the-minute information for passengers who are waiting. I want to say thank you to the county because the cost sharing on engineering, pouring of new fully accessible concrete pads, and purchase of shelters were all thanks to the partnership and funding available through the county. In Elgin, we're expanding our River Division garage to keep up with growing demand for express bus service on I-90 between Elgin and Rosemont. And again, that serves southern McHenry County. I'm going to jump now to fares. We have made a number of fare changes, decreasing fares, and working with Metra and the CTA to ensure that our passes provide easier transfer options for our riders. So there were a number of reductions that we made during COVID that then became permanent. And I won't list all of those fare changes, but again, these are fare reductions or freezing fares at existing levels to make transportation more affordable for our residents. So now I'll talk a little bit more about service. I talked about the ongoing challenge of the pandemic that all of us are facing and our recovery. I want to acknowledge something that was already brought forward in some of the questions by some of you, and that is that service will not look the same as it did prior to COVID for any of us. Our world has changed and pace is changing with it. And so it's important that we focus on the implementation of new innovative programs to meet the new needs of those we serve. And we have several innovative programs that I'd like to highlight today. The first is we have already signed contracts with 2 transportation network companies, or TNCs, ride sharing, to supplement existing ADA paratransit service and meet that growing demand. And part of this is convenience, and it works really well in McHenry County if we're partnering with Uber and Lyft, for example. Part of it is a convenience for our residents. Part of it is we're all facing a real problem with a driver shortage. So this also helps us address some gaps in service related to an insufficient number of drivers. But I'm really proud that PACE is leading that effort. Additionally, we have partnered with the developer of the trip planning app called Transit to enable our customers in 2023 to seamlessly plan and book multiple types of PACE services. So, for example, somebody trying to plan a trip to Round Lake Heights who's unable to see through existing trip planners available through Google and other apps, that they have the option to transfer from a paced fixed route on a Metra train to a paced bus in Round Lake. This is the multimodal concept and making things seamless for our riders between Metra, CTA, and PACE. So this app will be available that makes it quite convenient to plan trips, and we think that will benefit not just PACE, but CTA and Metra as well. We're continuing to work with the county and the city of Crystal Lake, as Chairman Bueller mentioned. I'm very encouraged by some of our earlier conversations about how we might bring the 550 fixed route up McHenry County while still McHenry Avenue, up McHenry Avenue, while still being sympathetic to the neighbors who are in the quiet neighborhood between 14 and the train station and don't want a bus stop in their front yard. So we're looking for ways that we might reroute the bus while still picking up people who today between Dartmoor and 14 don't have the access they need. We have senior living, we have affordable housing, and we're not meeting their needs. But those conversations are ongoing, and I think we're making really good progress. The next one I want to talk about is our van pool initiative that we're piloting outside of McHenry County, but I think will be really beneficial in McHenry County. We call this Van Go, and without me reading my notes, I can kind of describe it. It's a little bit like the zip car concept, but it's a van that you can rent for the day, so that if you take the Metra and you now need an easy way to get from the Metra station to your office, you can rent a van for a very small daily fee. And this is particularly useful for commuters who might be in a hybrid work environment and may only be taking Metra 2 or 3 days a week rather than 5 days a week, but they now have a convenient option. So again, this is encouraging, this is closing a gap in service where some exists, but also encouraging ridership both for PACE as well as Metra. And I think that has a lot of value in McHenry County. PACE's not-for-profit van pool programs continue to support McHenry County as well, including providing support to Horizons for the Blind in Crystal Lake and McHenry County Veterans Assistance Commission, just to name a couple. We're continuing to work with the county to enhance paratransit options with MC Ride. Last year, we were able to provide additional $200,000 in the budget. That's not in this year's budget. That was a one-time event, but we did increase the contribution from PACE to the county by 15% in the 2023 budget, and I'm happy about that. Last few years have been very challenging, and as I said, we really are struggling with a shortage of riders. And another, again, innovative thing that we're doing that will addresses the rider shortage and I think could be beneficial in McHenry County. We have a formal relationship now with Olive Harvey College as well as Harper, where we are funding certification programs for drivers. And it's really a terrific job opportunity. These are good paying jobs with good retirement plans. And we're trying to encourage more people to become bus drivers by funding that and partnering with the community college. So I think MCC would be a terrific next college for that opportunity. We understand now more than ever that we need to reassess demand, as I've said, and what does that mean? It means that we're undertaking a very comprehensive study to better understand today's demands of ridership so that we can revitalize our network and put solutions in place that are more progressive and better suited to the future. So I will just simply conclude by again saying thank you for the partnership. I'm really excited about the innovative programs PACE has in place for 2023 and that we're ahead of schedule towards our 2040 goal of a fully zero emissions fleet. And I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Okay.
Seeing none,
One thing I did not do, I did not introduce Ed Gallagher. I realize Ed Gallagher is our new community relations representative, and I could not be more thrilled. He's been delightful to work with. But also he's the community relations representative for Lake County, and there's a lot of best practices sharing that can take place between Lake and McHenry counties. We have some similar needs. They're very envious of our successful implementation of MC Ride and have looked to us, and they're doing some innovative things in Lake County, like the Waukegan electric bus fleet that we can learn from. Do you have a question, Chairman?
So, I was just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge the strong relationship that we've had with PACE over the last decade, and as we've built a successful, now county-wide MC Ride program. And thank you for mentioning, I did see on the agenda that you've increased your financial commitment to the county by $70,000 over last year, and that's just going to enable more county residents to get the rides that they need. And thank you for supporting McHenry County.
Chairman?
Ms.
Sorry.
Parrish.
Thank you. Thank you, Erin, for your presentation, and I was trying to decide where I wanted to interject, and I thought now's the time. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of the presentations this morning. Thank you very much. I sit at a variety of tables where we hear constantly about transportation concerns, opportunities for doing things differently, and how do we help get our county residents to and from where they need to be. So I'm excited to hear of all the things that are being talked about. Certainly it's difficult to hear the financial challenges, but we understand that, and I appreciate everyone's efforts as you're trying to think about how do we do things differently so we can address the financial needs as well as address the gaps. And I just wanted to take a moment to kind of connect some dots for future conversations, and because one of the places that we hear a lot about transportation is at our Senior Services Grant Commission, and I want to thank in particular Scott Hennings for some conversations that I've had with him, and I'm excited to hear about our involvement, particularly his involvement in these conversations, because I think he has a lot of great ideas that he has had conversations with people about to try and get those moving forward, and I'm excited to hear and see the involvement of our PTAC group, and I'm offline. I want to hear more about the not-for-profit rides that you mentioned, because I'm hopeful that that might expand, because that's one of the places where I hear a lot about our not-for-profit organizations trying to support the clients that they serve with transportation. So with all that said, I'm just, while it's difficult to hear the financial struggles and challenges, I'm excited about the opportunities and conversations that are happening, and I'm very proud and excited about the county's efforts and the people that we have involved at the local level as well as the regional and state level for these conversations, and that hopefully we'll be able to continue to address the needs, the transportation needs for our residents, and continue to help them get more often and more successfully to where they need to be. So
Thank you for
very
your comments, and happy to talk more about the van pool program for nonprofit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have our Sheriff's Department with an update on the Public Safety Training Facility.
I thought I'd come up here instead of sit over at my regular spot. Thank you. Good morning. Wanted to be really quick with this update. I did hand out the results of our bid for the joint training facility and firing range. This is still draft. We have FQC, who is our construction management company, is still going through the bids and ensuring that the individuals who came in as the lowest responsible bid actually do meet the specs. We have a few alternatives within this project also that we are looking at, and that's some of it is just substitutes for materials like roofing materials, et cetera. So depending on what alternatives meet our specs and if that's sufficient to not only our construction management company but our facilities management, then we'll move forward with that. We are looking forward to bringing a resolution to the December county board meeting, the county board meeting. My understanding is there won't be any committees in December, so the resolution is just going to finalize these numbers. The Director of Finance does require an official resolution since a majority of the money is the ARPA funds for this project. So it's really an informative resolution, but it'll button up the bids for both projects. If you have any questions, you don't have to ask now. You can call me so you can move on with your agenda, or I can answer them now.
Mr. Vijik.
Thank you. I appreciate the information that you provided for us. Can you turn your mic on? I was just looking under the...
Can you turn your mic on, please?
Oh, I apologize. I was just looking under the joint firing range table that you provided for us under contingency, 299,000. The bids were 209, and you have a variance of 24,000. Could you tell me where did that variance come from?
So, that's from the original budget and the actual bids. So the contingency is based on the actual bid amount that comes in.
Okay, well,
No, there's a variance of 24, it should be 0
it should be 0.
on the spreadsheet.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh,
Scala.
I apologize. So one of those numbers is wrong. So we'll get you an updated.
Thank you.
That'll be the contingency on the bids.
All right, thank you. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vijik. Any other questions? See none? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, new business. Do any board members have items they'd like to remove for discussion? See none. Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith?
Did you acknowledge me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And the zoning petitions 10.A.1 and the ordinances 17.B.1. Thank you.
Mr. Thorson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to remove 14A, under appointments. And under ordinances, I would like to, remove 17B4. Thank you.
Ms. Wagner?
Thank you. 16B.2.3, I have to abstain from on Tuesday evening. And I want to pull 16.A.2.1, the EMA report.
A21. Thank you. Dr. Jensen?
Yes, I would like to point out that I'll be recusing myself from any discussion under appointments for the Mental Health Board as well as the Senior Services Grant Commission. I'd like to remind everyone that I was also an applicant for both entities, and also there's a typo. I'm Paula and not Paula Jensen. That's important. I'm kidding.
Thank you. Mr. Wilbeck?
16B215 and 16B216.
Thank you. Ms. Meshes?
16A6, and then I was trying to figure out, did Mr. Wilbug just pull the budget, or no? All right, well, I feel like we should pull the budget, but now I gotta find where it is on here. 17B6.
And the treasurer's report, is that what you said?
Yeah, in the treasury report, yeah.
Mr. Scala?
Yeah, I was gonna pull 17B5 and 6, which is the budget, so we could discuss the spreadsheet that was handed out.
Any others? Seeing none, Mr. Smith? 10A1.
Yeah, thank you. This is the Hunt Club in Richmond. It's been there forever. I personally don't have any problems with it, other than that, what they're asking for on the north side of the road, where would they position their sport clay shooting is not very far from the subdivision to the west. I will note that per the ZBA testimony, it was noted that proper notification was given to the public, and there were no one showed up to personally object to this. So I thought there's a potential that we're going to have complaints about the noise. So I thought it should be brought up, and if anyone has an objection to it, if they'd please come forward, because in the absence of any objection, I'm going to support this, the request for this shooting club. I'm a little baffled why there wasn't some more objections due to the proximity of the subdivision there. So that's all I had on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Dr. Jensen?
I just have a question from Mr. Smith about the clay shooting and the noise. Can we be assured by the Sheriff's Department that they will be enforcing the noise ordinance? I assume this area is an unincorporated area of McHenry County.
That's correct. It's unincorporated, just east of Richmond.
So it gets back to, if there are problems, we need assurance. We need assurance that that noise ordinance would be enforced if there is a complaint. That's the only concern I have.
Thank you. Mr. Thorson?
How long has it been a hunt club? Forever.
Forever, correct.
So I think that the residents are probably used to the sound of gunfire, so just an observation.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, do you have another? Nope. Okay, thank you. 14A, Mr. Thorson.
Yes.
Could you pull your mic a little bit closer?
I have a concern with regard to 3 new appointments for the Mental Health Board, and I understand that they were probably necessary. But I do feel that with this board basically losing 15 members, and the mental health club is the mental health board is a very, it has a large budget. I'm concerned about 3 green recruits being overseen by green recruits to some extent. All due respect to everybody that's went through all the process and everything like that. And I'm wondering, what would the protocol be? Can we still challenge these things on the floor? And because I remember something had happened back in the other administration where we kind of got reschooled on what we could or could not do from the floor when it came to appointments. And that's my question.
I think if the majority of the board was in support of a change of an appointment, I would be open to that suggestion.
Okay, so going into the meeting, I can bring this forward as a potential amendment?
Right, I think
Thank
it would
you.
be a modification.
I just want to point out that
I would see it as a modification of the recommendation to the chairman to put
Okay.
something forward, yes.
Okay, because I really, I have to say that I think there's a continuity opportunity here with Paula. And I'm sorry, I know you're not gonna speak, but I think there's a continuity opportunity with Paula. And, under the circumstances of a fresh board and with the fact that we have 3 new members on the mental health board for, basically 2 more or 4 more years each, I'm going to ask that we consider Paula Jensen to be a member of that board. And we've all experienced the reports that we get from her, and we know that she's going to be very in touch with the next board if she's there, and I think that that is a huge opportunity that we're passing up. So that's all I have to say about that, but thank you for the time.
You, Ms. Wegner?
Thank you. I really appreciate what you said, Jeff. And I agree for continuity, all the way around. Obviously, I was not part of any of the discussions, but I would urge all of us to go watch the discussion, what happened in public health, and when it comes to who we may remove, I would have to leave that to somebody else, but I agree.
Thank you. Is that all? Any more questions? Ms. Schofield?
Yeah, thanks. As a member of public health, I just wanted to, I would encourage you to listen to the meeting because it was a very tough decision. We had excellent candidates. I mean, we really, really had excellent candidates. So Kelly just said the thing that I've been asked of, who would you not bring forward then? I mean, they were all really good candidates. So, and the ones that were there, as well as probably at least 2 or 3 others, were extremely qualified. I was conflicted, but I also have to say there wasn't one I would have really said no to. So I think that's the point in the process. That's a challenge, and maybe one that the chairman needs to start weighing in on, because of the fact that these are truly recommendations to him from the committee. So I would also
I guess
that out
for
there.
me, it's really the person that would not then be put forward. I would want to know a clear and compelling reason why they shouldn't be. And that would really be important to me. For somebody to be selected and then removed as a candidate to be put forward, I would really want to have a clear idea of why they shouldn't be after the committee spent time deliberating on it.
So don't look to me for that one. So thanks.
Ms. Meshes?
I'm trying not to repeat what Carolyn Schofield just said, but I agree with her. I mean, when those of you who listen to the meeting, perhaps you heard the conflict in my voice when we got to the 3rd appointment, because I believe I did say Paula should be on this board, but how can I vote against the person put up? And right, as for who to I felt all the candidates that came would have offered something to the board. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. I think that we need to be appreciative of the 7 people that came to interview. We need to be appreciative of the people who've served on the board. It is just an incredibly difficult decision. to pull somebody off after we have said that we are gonna put your trust in them. But at the same time, I do believe in that sentiment. I said it in the meeting, which is, I really do believe Paula should be on the board. I just can't vote against anybody in particular.
Mr. Gottemeller.
Yes, Mr. Thorson brought up something that if you go to the board rules, I'm happen to be looking at the ones that go into effect December 5th. I didn't look at the ones before, but I don't think we changed any of this part. So when we were schooled on this before, as somebody mentioned, there are some board appointments that the board makes, there are some the chairman makes, and there's some that we make together. This mental health board is one that the chair brings forward, but I'll read specifically what the board rules say. With respect to the following boards and commissions, the county board chairperson may present the standing committee recommendation for approval by the county board, or may choose to bring forward his or her own choice for appointment. The individual shall be appointed if approved by the majority of the county board members present, and mental health board is one of those. So this actually falls on the chairman's in your category. You're the only one who can bring the name forward. We can't change the name.
Okay, so no amendment.
So an amendment from the board floor, we could reject somebody that you put forward, but we don't have the right to put a new name in place once it gets here. That comes from you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Vijik?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am not clear on the amount of people that would be necessary. Would it be possible that we would look at the mental health board to see if an additional person or persons could be added on? That may be an option, that with the quality of people that have applied, as well as the concerns of continuity that members of the board has recommended to you. Maybe that might be an option. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
I do have an answer on that one. Leonetta just reminded me, the Community and Mental Health Act prescribes the size of the board.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes, I was really just going to it's more of an observation, looking back at the way we've kind of appointed people over time. And part of it is just how the process evolves within that meeting. So getting to the point of once somebody has brought forward to vote on, because we get so many good qualified candidates, it is really hard to say no to somebody who you know that each and every one of them had something important that they could bring to the table. I know we had that problem in PED when we had for the Conservation District. And so it does get challenging, and I do know that I think Public Health did deliberate for about 25 minutes before you got to that third recommendation. But once a name is brought forward, and especially if it's brought in forward too early in the process, I think that's where it gets complicated. Because at that point now, unless you table it and say, let's keep discussing the different candidates, because sometimes I've seen that some candidates don't even get mentioned during the process when they've gone through the trouble of submitting an application, making time out of their day to come and interview with the committee, and then their name doesn't even come up because somebody gets brought forward as a recommendation to move to a point before everyone gets discussed. And I'm not necessarily saying that that happened here, but that's what can happen with this process where we bring somebody's name forward too early before the discussion is done. Again, the discussion went on for 25 minutes before they got to that third appointment, so that's not my implication here. It's just maybe something each committee could be looking at as we go forward with these appointments. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Parrish?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to duplicate what some of the committee members have already mentioned, but I thank committee members for their input. I wanted to, and thank you, Member Gottemeller, for reading the board rules. I appreciate that. One of the things I wanted to say, and I've said before, so it's not related to this situation only, but as this board does move from 24 to 18 and committee assignments change and the volume of work changes, the consideration for liaison positions, I think, is going to need to be looked at greatly or deeply, because you know, I'm just thinking, and I've said it before, CDHG, Senior Services Grant Commission, Board of Health, and those were just the ones I were given the responsibility to participate in. And I don't know my current sitting board members' additional responsibilities that you have. I'm wondering if with any of the appointments, maybe some of these more specific ones like Board of Health, Mental Health Board, is there an opportunity to look at other ideas for those appointments? So maybe not a sitting board member, but as Mr. Thorson so wonderfully articulated, you know, Dr. Jensen's commitment and dedication and service to the Mental Health Board has been exemplary. And as was mentioned, I will repeat that that meeting was very difficult. And it was kind of ironic. I lamented for quite some time before the first scheduled meeting as to how it would go, because as Lynn mentioned, I wanted us to be able to talk about every applicant, because I have seen this process evolve over time. And there were meetings that I sat in where we had people interview and we never talked about them. And I was for certain going to make sure that that didn't happen. As the universe or God decided, we didn't have a quorum on that first scheduled meeting, so we didn't even have that first meeting, and I thought it was kind of humorous in regards to the fact that I had lamented over how that process would go. So I think we all took great care and concern and thoughtfulness around who we put forth. So to that, you know, if whatever chairman decides, as it is in his purview now, as the board rules read, if it's not a reorganization to the names that the committee recommended, perhaps there's an opportunity to look at a exemplary individual who has given service to the Mental Health Board, and perhaps she could serve as the liaison. I don't know the statutes and whether or not it has to be a sitting board member. That would be the liaison to the Mental Health Board in the county. Just one idea in addition to the others that have already been mentioned. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Jindrak.
Thank you. I too serve on the Public Health and Committee, and this really was a tough decision. We had 7 applicants that came forward, but I did want to just give high-level highlights for the applicants that we chose. Ms. Keisman, she has a 7-figure practice, a consulting and counseling practice. She's also a board member of the Substance Abuse Coalition. She's more on the financial and business ownership side. She knew the mental health board budget. She was aware of many of the items that were important to the mental health board. Ms. Braun, she is a PhD. She worked with Scott Block as a professor. She teaches at Aurora Schools. She was appointed by Governor Quinn in 2013. She has been involved in lots of after-school evaluation programs. She brought a completely different idea on some of the ways that we can partner with industry workers and recruit new applicants and new partners in the in the therapy and professional industries. And then Miss Rath, she had more of a personal story and background. She has 2 daughters that are her biological daughters, and then she adopted 2 daughters through the foster care program, and she was able to discuss some of the really important parts to mental health, which is the insurance on the public side and the private side. So some of those challenges that she had from a personal perspective. And she also works at Northwestern and DePaul in a master's program. And she has 20 years of experience with reviews to budgets. So although every single applicant was absolutely incredible, and I couldn't thank Dr. Jensen for all of her information, all of her background, because of course I could go through all of Dr. Jensen's background too and all of her highlights. It was a really tough choice, but we all worked together, and we did go through the highlights for each individual, all 7 of them, as Ms. Parrish pointed out. And then also, we did talk about the additional openings in the future, and so if there's anybody who's interested, including Dr. Jensen, of course, but December of 2024 would be the next available 4 positions, 4 terms that would be up at that point that could be applied for. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thorson?
I just want to point out that, about 8 years ago, not going to name any names, but about 8 years ago, there was a appointee recommended to the chairman. And that appointee had a unanimous approval from the committee, and the chairman did not appoint that person. So it has happened in the past. The other thing I'd like to talk about is when, this board, my understanding is that this board, which has a budget, is a substantial budget, but this board, the board president had absolutely no input on any of this discussion. And I thought that, at least that's my understanding. That's what I was told. And I think that that's key. I think that that's very important, is that because you're going to be working with the board, I think that at least some kind of communication, more communication would be in order. The other thing I'd like to point out is I think it's absolutely essential to have serious board experience to get on this board. I think it's a very, very important board. And I'll leave it at that. But I just wanted to point out there's a couple of things there that I think that need to be out in the open. Thank you.
Mr. Thorson, Ms. Wagner.
I just want to talk about the process real quick. I would like the new incoming administrative committee to discuss changing the board rules so that we must discuss the applicants before there's a motion made to appoint somebody. I think that's really important. I think we've talked about this before, but I think it's really important that we all participate in a discussion about all of the applicants before somebody can just jump in and appoint, because I don't think it's I don't think that takes everybody into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 16A21. Ms. Wagner.
So I was just curious because in reading this, it talked about how different EMA departments had talked about asylum seekers, and I was just wondering how that would fit into emergency management planning.
Yes, so were we. When the first asylum seekers came on the buses from El Paso, we were at the IEMA conference, and actually blindsided that they were placed into DuPage County, and immediately the DuPage County coordinator was on deck to take care of them, just as we would if we were sheltering, our own residents from a storm and what have you. And IEMA, Illinois Emergency Management Agency, at first was a lead role. And in a disaster, like for the health pandemic, it's HHS, Health and Human Services, that's the lead role. And for every disaster, one of the government entities are lead role. Initially, IEMA was the lead role. We were fortunately all together. So Allison Anderson from Will County, Craig Diekman from DuPage, and myself were together and discussed it and started working out, well, how do we do this? The biggest part of our discussions, and so at this point in time, IEMA is the lead role, which transfers down to local EMA in the counties. It was, how do we help each other? Because we didn't know where the next group was going to go. It was, blind, there was no communication, and so that's how EMA became part of that. The 3 of those counties, we were the most active, and we figured We thought Lake was going to also, Lake County was going to be, but Dan Eters from Lake County was still reeling from Highland Park. He didn't join into our deal. We created shared drives to share information. Will County and McHenry County independently came up with, well, what's our game plan? Who are the responsible entities? And I got to tell you, there's some entities here in McHenry County that really stood up to the plate as to, because I can't do it all, right? There's 4 of us. And so, you know, everything from, you know, translation services to, well, where are we going to put them? Because we just don't have the facilities like Cook or Chicago might have to house people, and we've had challenges with homeless. So that's what it was. That's why it was primarily 3 counties working together. Okay, Allison, if they end up in Will County, here's how DuPage and McHenry can support you, and vice versa. They ended up moving them out of DuPage, or there was dispersal from the DuPage site, and then they moved the few remaining out and back into Cook. And that's when DHS, Department of Health and Services, I think it's IDHS, took over as the lead, so the EMA roles, ours became a support role. My partner Ted Berger in Cook County, what he's doing is he's moving assets around. He's the one that you may have heard of, the bus services, to get them from wherever they're lodging to perhaps a medical appointment or whatever. That's what that EMA did, and not in a support role and not in a lead role. But I know it was a long-winded answer, but sometimes it's good for you to know what's going on behind the scenes. And so we tried to put it together. I tried to make our county prepared. Pete and Scott, both, you know, great players to help, you know, coach me along. And you know, because the first thing I went to them is, you've given me a budget, right? And I can do what I normally do, but I had no dollars to make hotels, make food, whatever. So I went to them to see, well, how we're going to do that. And that's where we found a lot of community partners that were going to help us take care of that. So I'm sorry it's such a long-winded answer, but perhaps it's better that you get a feel for how it, you know, it played out.
Definitely. Thank you for that. That's really interesting.
Any other comments? Seeing none. 16A6, Ms. Meshes, Treasurer's Report.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Miller, for all your work on as treasurer for your years of service. And I just counted the number of funds you're overseeing. It's 86, I believe, unless I counted wrong. I wanted to clarify, so with these funds, many of them have rules over how they can be spent, right? Correct? Many of these funds have rules over how they can be spent? Yes. Because like in looking, like if you know, as you know, your sum total from beginning of fiscal year, or our sum total from the beginning of fiscal year 2022 to August has, in total, when you include all the funds, like a $19 million gain from the beginning of the year. Do we expect a lot of expenditures from the August date to the end of our fiscal year?
If you want to step up to a microphone, please.
Just flip that switch.
On top. Towards you.
Nope.
Yep.
Yep, it works. Okay. All right. The treasurer's report that you receive from us is really based on balanced accounts to base the funds on the general ledger side. Well, the biggest portion of the budgets are payroll, okay? The payroll entries and everything that are entered on the general ledger side to match to what's in the bank. We work with real money. You know, so it's very challenging. The one thing I have, and my accountant that works for me, that presents that report for you folks, she is very frustrated because of our new financial software. You know, over the years, I've been in the office for 27 years, 18 years as a chief deputy, and now the last 2 terms as your treasurer. We used to have the ability on our side, or it was our responsibility to do the entries that would hit the general ledger side. That was under performance series. That went away 4 years ago. We got D365, the web base. Now it's formed out to the departments. The entries in the system for cash receipts, that type of thing, is done by departments. We on the banking side see them in the system. We approve them or not approve them, and how they go through and actually move monies. So it's been challenging for my girls, and especially my accountant. So the staff I have, we've had for 20-some years. Myself and my former predecessor hired the ladies that work in my office. There's 12 of us total, including me. We have this one empty spot, as you see on there, that if in the future, with the new technologies, if my successor needs to have another person in there to help out with the duties that we do, that was there. We can't sustain the level of service that we provide, which I'm very proud of. My girls know the function of our office. We send out 139 tax bills, collect 235 million in property taxes. If you've been by my office on tax due dates, it's very busy. These girls, they know how the office works, they know the laws that we have to follow, and they have to deal with the taxpayers. One of the things that I find, when we send that bill out, people get it, they bitch and moan about how much they have to pay. The portion of what we operate on in the county is very minimal. It's about 9% of the whole tax bill that you pay. You can see that on your graph on your taxes. But what I'm saying is, as you as the county board, when you're passing levies, you have to think in the sustainability. We can't sustain at zero. One, we have inflation. We have our, let's see how I put this. I wrote a few notes here. The supply chain, we need paper. I have to think of who's coming in after me. Now it's going to be Donna. She's going to have to get new letterhead with her name on it, because we're the elected office. All that stuff is costly. We've kept our maintenance budget. We move monies around within our budget to make sure it's sustainable, but it can't continue. And if with what I have, I don't want to lose. I've talked with the administrator and Kevin about the open position that you see that's on that listing. I'm leaving it, I left it there just in the event that we need to have another body to do the job of our office. One of the things that we found recently is in the tax collection, citizens have the ability to do bill pay checks through their bank. Those are manual checks that are sent to our office. All it is a check. If the taxpayer doesn't put their parcel number on there, we have to research by their address, if they have one on there, to enter it into the system. If not, we send it back to that individual saying can't identify where to apply it. So I've been talking with my successor of maybe in technology, maybe she can find a way to do a technical program where they can read these checks so that it would identify the parcel. So it's very challenging. I mean, I've seen a lot of things through the 27 years I've been here. And by the way, I only have 19 days left. And it's a bittersweet. I mean, I love what I do, and I've met a lot of people in this county, and I'm going to miss everybody. But it is time to move. But I'd like to see that. And as far as the treasurer's report, I'm hoping that going forward, we work with Kevin and his staff real close, because we got to make sure everything's in balance. We can't have it out of balance.
Thank you. One of my questions was, do we expect the $19 million fund balance to fall dramatically from August, where this report comes from, to the end of our fiscal year?
I don't see it. I mean, we work on them, you know, but that includes all the different
it's all the fund
departments,
balances.
right?
Yes.
So I don't know what planning and development's doing in the next couple months. I don't know what DOT's doing. I don't know what our health department's doing. So that all is encompassed in that report, you know, or their fund balances.
Correct, yes. So the other question I have is, in the balances and all the reports, so some of our departments have a number of accounts that they would enter into through the treasury, right?
Pardon?
For these funds. For the funds, there's a number of our departments that tap into a variety of these funds, right? So planning and development probably has a couple in here. The sheriff's department certainly has a couple in here, because my eyes right now currently stuck on the narcotics forfeiture, which isn't that much, but I just don't know. What kind of freedom do the departments have to move, instead of using general fund money, using the money out of these funds?
They don't, I mean, they don't, when they submit something in, it's a workflow, okay? They submit into D365 what they want to expend. It goes to a department head, then it flows over through another area, which is for approval and stuff for movement. We don't move monies until we get approval of those monies being spent.
If I may, so with the $19 million, the question about whether that's a $19 million increase in fund balances, this is more of a cash flow statement than a reflection of the modified accrual accounting that we do for our financials. So in this case, I do expect that number to change. There's a lot of expenditures that happen at the end of the year, and a lot of those are obligations that we have to account for, that we have to expense directly in this fiscal year. So I do expect that number, 249 million, to change, and that $19 million increase could be even higher than that, but I wouldn't label that as fund balance that we can tap into for expenditures in the future years. Your second question about the funds and the departments, what freedom they have to move funds around, those are a lot of them are restricted, special revenue funds that are tied to federal, state, and even local grants. They have rules that they have to follow according to those grant agreements that the board have approved. So in this case, they can only use it for expenditures that they applied for. So I couldn't, for example, ask the sheriff's office to move some of the narcotics funds.
It's only 14,000, by the way, for the public listening. It's a very small number.
And those are the ones that are labeled like 900 here. Those are agency funds that the county board doesn't really have control over how those funds are expended, because it's at the per federal rules, those are at the department level. They just have a financial reporting responsibility to the county board.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the treasurer's report? Seeing none. Mr. Wilbeck, 16B, 215 and 16.
Yeah, I'm just mandated to stay consistent, so I'm going to pull those for the RFQ process. I still must say that people personally don't do personal business that way, and normal business practices don't dictate that either. So just going to stay consistent. I'm going to pull it on Tuesday, and that's it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith, 17B1.
Thank you. The ordinance to change some of the local amendments here, we have a discrepancy, and I'm going to lean on Adam to explain this discrepancy so we can revise this. And it's not a big deal, it just needs to be revised so it all reads the same. Adam, please.
Yes, sir. So we have, the particular discrepancy is in the pool and spa code. What we had proposed and the intent of the ordinance was to match what has been in place since 1981 in the nuisance ordinance, requiring the barriers and not allowing retractable covers in lieu of a barrier, of a 48-inch barrier. Well, we amended that, but it was in two places, so we've now corrected that in both places so that it would be consistent.
That's all we need to do is amend it, make it consistent. So that we can do before the board meeting when?
Yeah, I've got it drafted up and ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thorson, 17B4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to kind of get a feel for what the significant changes are with the public health ordinance.
Patty?
Thank you. I am Patty Noem. I'm in the Environmental Health Division, but I did work with Susan and Mary Ellen on all of the ordinance revisions. And primarily, we were trying to do some streamlining, and we do review the ordinances every other year just for consistency and to try to catch things that were inadvertently done in a previous version, that may be problematic. So we did try to strengthen our general provisions, which is Article 1, by moving all of our purpose, our intents, our definitions into one. That was for clarity. We did some clarifications on appeal processes and things like that for clarity for the general public and the regulated community. And then we did some technical updates in private sewage and the water well, working with our water well contractors and our private sewage contractors to make some changes where there were some clarity for malfunctioning systems and some other technical changes. But that's essentially what we did with this round of revisions.
Could you explain to me what was the language under section 8.04.840? Clean up language to include cats as intended.
Oh, do I have a typo in there?
No, that's mine.
Oh, okay.
Because I remember we had some discussion about that here at this board, and I just wonder what was.
Mary Ellen Howell. So really, I think there was a typo when we did the last one, and we are doing registration and vaccination for all dogs and cats. And there was one little section where cats was missed.
And the point of controversy was the cat part, right? The registration?
Correct.
But did the board pass that? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. 17B5, Mr. Scala.
Is it okay if I do 5 and 6 together?
Yep.
Okay. So at our finance committee meeting last week, the staff had brought forward the spreadsheet that's sitting at your desk that is up on the screens. As you recall, with the new budget process that we have, if there was any modifications to the budget that was put on 30-day review, we had requested that we know in advance exactly where those dollars would be coming from. So with this spreadsheet, what we talked about at finance was the different items that would be cut or proposed to be cut if either CPI or new growth or any of the other 3 items that we had proposed in order to balance the budget were not passed in the budget. I know that staff worked very diligently to try and figure out how best to not impact operations in coming up with this list. As you can see, it totals about 1.8, a little over 1.8 million. Again, for reference, new growth is a little over 400,000 and CPI is 990,000. And then the other 3 items were shifts in, the one was taking ARPA funds and charging out to Valley High. I know that we have members of departments and elected officials here who want to plead their case to not cut theirs. So if there are questions by board members to them directly about how that would impact operations, I'm sure they would be happy to answer those. One of the suggestions that came out of finance by finance committee members would be that if a board member in particular wants to modify what was on 30-day review, that they put something in writing, outlining exactly what they would be proposing cutting or modifying, so that hopefully on on Tuesday night, things won't be quite a cluster and we can get through the budget. Trying to avoid what happened last year. So I thought that was a really good suggestion. Figured I'd mention it so that hopefully we can pass a budget and a levy, and we can start on December 1st. I don't know if staff, you have anything you want to add to all that?
Thank you, Mike. I kind of had some of the same comments. I mean, this essentially, this is a difficult list of choices, uncomfortable choices. We don't need to make any of them. The budget on display, it balances, it addresses some real challenges the state put on us with not only the Safety Act, which we've talked about a lot, but remember the new rules regarding the VAC and new pressures that we put on the levy there. Incredible inflation, not only on wages, which you guys have done a real good job of stepping up and helping staff with meet wage inflation challenge, but also commodities and contractuals. And the budget that was put forward by Finance Committee in early October has been on display for 30 days now. It meets all those challenges, and yeah, we can be there. So thanks.
Dr. Jensen.
Thank you, Chairman. I was at a meeting yesterday, and many of them at that meeting were seniors, and they're having a hard time, difficult time making ends meet, and I think it would be hard for me to support your increase in the CPI, because we're looking at an expanding demographic of seniors in our county. And you're talking here about moving the levy from the Senior Services Grant Commission to the general fund, and you have them in increments of suggestions. And let me finish here.
Well, Ms. Dr. Jensen, we're not proposing that. The budget on display does not do that.
I understand that, but if I don't support the CPI, then you have to look at alternatives. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct.
Of where some of these cuts need to occur. Is that correct?
Correct.
Am I hearing you correctly? And I'm saying to you what the proposed suggestions, if we do not support the CPI, let me finish. For the Senior Services Grant Commission, that puts the levy down to a number where, how do we, and I don't expect anyone to answer this question, to adequately fund some of these programs to the level of which services can be provided. And there's gotta, if we don't pass the budget with the CPI, there's gotta be another way to look at some of these cuts. I mean, first of all, one of my colleagues suggested Mr. Keneally's office, of cutting some of the waste out of there. To me, I appreciate all the work that you have done as far as trying to be strategic in this discussion if the majority of us vote against the CPI. But,
Just general, we want to be careful when we say the CPI. The CPI, the state would have allowed the county to capture over $4 million through this Consumer Price Index. So the budget before you on 30-day review is about $990,000.
I know that.
Okay. I just want to, we're not, I don't want to generally say CPI. We're taking less than 25%.
I know, and I know what that base number is, over 900,000, and, but it gets back to if we do not,
These are just options.
then we need to find.
I just want to make sure we're using,
To balance.
generalizing the CPI.
And to balance, I know. Thank you for that correction, but I'm just letting you know that we've got to find another way. And the people I was with yesterday, you know, they came up to me and they really wanted to talk about it. There's a lot of pain out there. So that's all I'm gonna say, and I defer to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Jensen. Mr. Kearns.
Okay, hey, I just have one question on, and this is for Pete and Kevin. It's actually Scott, but Scott's not here, I see. And I just, the Loss Prevention and Protection Fund, 2.75. I know we've paid out quite a bit this past year and it's drawn down. What's the level of that fund right now? It's really low, isn't it?
It's very low. You know, the last 4 or 5 years, this board has really challenged itself with trying to reduce that levy and you know, we'll recall back to 2016, 17 when there was a market drop. That tort fund levy that has been reduced dramatically, and we really need to get it back up. So that's why it's not proposed as one of our solutions. If there is no willingness to take any of the allowable CPI, I would not recommend looking at the tort fund for the solution.
So how much have we paid out of that fund in the last 3 years? And how much have we put into it?
I wasn't prepared for that question, and we can get you those answers, but we have been taking more out than we have been putting in.
I'm aware of that.
I can tell you.
I'm aware of that. I'm just asking these questions for my own
We use that
thought.
fund for a lot of operating expenses, right? There are attorneys we charge to that fund to help, you know, keep us out of trouble, and other expenses on a day-to-day basis, in addition to losses.
Okay,
We can't predict the losses, but we can predict the operating expenses.
okay. Kevin?
I don't think this is working yet, but, yeah, no, that balance, the fund balance in that fund has gone down to 1.7 million.
2.7?
1.7.
Oh,
Yeah,
1.7.
It used to be, you know, as Scott has mentioned in the past. Thank you. So, as Scott mentioned in the past, you know, if it only takes one claim or two claims to fully deplete that, and you know, I don't want to make any statements about what's coming up, but 1.7 wouldn't be enough to cover one of those claims. And as Pete has mentioned, over the last 4 or 5 fiscal years, we have used that fund to, similar to what we did with the county highway fund, to tap into it, budget more in expenditures than revenues coming in, which, because the general fund couldn't really support the expenditures and moving, or the levy within the, you know, whether it's 2019, 2020, or 2021 levy. So there is I'm not sure if your question is whether we're looking at that as an option, as fund balance option, or if the question is about how healthy that fund is, it's not. And Scott, the conversations that we have had is that he's been looking at that levy to be increased by, you know, at least to go to 3.25 million.
He's built a model not
right.
unlike what he did for Valley High to help us build a path back to the strength that we should have there.
Okay. Well, and I appreciate your answers on that, because that's part of the discussion on the fly, as I'll say to Ms. Altoff, part of my discussion on the fly of where possibly we can save some funds, and yet I wanted to ask about the possible exposures and that level before I even thought about that. So, thank you.
And just a kind of general statement on the fund balances, because we have been using our fund balances over the last 4 or 5 years, it really is like the perfect financial storm right now for us, because that fund balance is really, the line, and I recall one of the presentations we showed this slide where it shows what the fund balance policy is and what each fund that it's supported by the tax levy, where they are at, and they are so close to each other that there's no space for us to look there. Otherwise, we're getting into that territory where if the budget increases next year, then we're going to have to be budgeting to replenish fund balance in a year or two. And that's the issue that we're trying to resolve, and that's the issue that long-term we're trying to do right now so that we're not in that situation. And that's where I appreciate the leadership that Mike Scala has demonstrated over the last few months in planning these. It's more about how do we avoid that conversation in a year or two where we're not budgeting for fund balances, we're budgeting for the operations, so that we stay on track with our own policies.
So I have one last question, and this wouldn't be for Kevin. But one last question on these unfunded mandates on the Safety Act. And I know the state's attorneys around the county, the 62 counties are suing right now on that, and they're hoping, I think I read this morning, they were hoping for a stay on that. If they succeed in that, would we, and I guess it's not a good thing to plan on any hopes. But if they succeeded on that, would we not hire those state's attorneys and those investigators if they didn't have to pay for the Safety Act or be required by the Safety Act? I guess that would be for the state's attorney. And I'm not trying to say that, I'm just trying to say, if he succeeds here in December, if they succeed, would we not hire those people? And this isn't, so I don't know if it's off subject.
Before Norm says, I will say that I've always been very impressed and very much in touch with our office holders and department heads that they are responsible, in doing the hiring that they need and not unnecessarily building their budget. So if we found at some point in the future that things weren't as we anticipated, I'm confident that they would respond.
Okay, and I'm only saying that because I don't want to take away from any of those categories, remove those. I don't want to remove those. That was just a question I thought would like an answer to, is if we would possibly hire or not hire if that found to be unconstitutional.
Yeah, and if there were a stay issued, well, let me back up a second with the time frame. There's a real short briefing schedule that's set for this. All the cases were consolidated in Kankakee County. There is a hearing date, I believe, scheduled in very early December, and there's expected to be a decision, I think, by December 13th. I believe that's the date. So we're pressing right up against January 1st. And I know the court system is preparing for this and what they're going to do. We are, public defender is, and there are a lot of court services, a lot of offices preparing. But certainly, let's say that there was a stay put in place, and if that stay stayed, like I'm sure whatever happens, it's going to get appealed. But if that stay were to stay in place, then yeah, we would put off our plans. We don't want to have people on the payroll that don't have that work to do. The fear is if it comes to December 13th and the judge says, I disagree with you, I'm dismissing your case, or I'm ruling against you, or I'm not going to enter a stay in this, so then we have to go ahead and put it all in place.
Have we hired any of those employees yet?
No, we have not.
Are we interviewing yet?
Every position on this sheet is yet to be hired.
Okay.
And that's, frankly, they're the easiest ones to not, because we're
Right,
asking
right.
somebody to, right.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Vijik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The proposal that is on the sheet here and up on the screen for everyone to see, the move the levy from the Senior Services Grant Fund to the General Fund, $300,000. I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of saying, and maybe you could clarify if I'm wrong, is the idea that they would have less money to provide for services for seniors. Is that correct?
Quick correction, you said move the money from the Senior Services Fund to the General Fund. That is not what we would just be levying less for the senior.
You would be, so the Senior Services Commission would still have, and Dr. Jensen, you have a knowledge of this, or Ms. Parrish has this, still about 1.6 million?
No. I would expect that if that option was selected, if that's where the board wants to go, is that we would likely see about 1.3 million or 1.4 million available for distribution next October, right? You would have basically 12 months to get ready for it, but that's how that would unfold.
Okay, so we would, again, in my head, trying to say, would it be decreasing funding available for services for senior services?
Right.
All right. Given that being the case, I'm looking at the idea of trying to say to my constituents, whether they're young, middle age, older, that we may be cutting programs for seniors such as dental care, food, providing for, I apologize, I don't have all the things, but when I remember when I was on senior services, it would be so many critical things like getting people to and from doctor's appointments to support them. I'm going to have a hard time supporting this when I have to go to constituents and they go, you mean I don't get potentially food? I'm not blaming you, please understand it. I could potentially not getting food, but, and I looked at our proposal that was given to us a number of months ago, seal coating for $35,000, the IT business analyst for $68,000, a mental health, I apologize, I have to look, make sure I have this right, a mental health comp assistant, probation analyst, which I come up with $213,000. I will have a very difficult time explaining to constituents that we want to hire more people. Yes, there are more challenges. I'm not denying that people are in need, but do I take food or supplementary money from seniors to get an analyst or to seal coat my driveway, seal coat the parking lot, excuse me? How do I explain that to them? And I'm not asking you for an answer, but that would be the problem that either I or future board members are going to have to say to seniors, you don't need the dental appointments. We're not going to subsidize that, but we're going to seal coat our parking lot. That, I can't accept that, and Mr. Chairman, I'll point this out to you, that I would have to be a no on that. So I point that out as this is something that I think there are other areas that may be more analyzed than that. And I apologize, I sound somewhat passionate about it, but I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. Ms. Jindrak?
Thank you. I just have a couple clarification questions. So when we mentioned non-compliance with the election mandates on line 1, that I understand because if we don't mail them, of course, we're out of compliance. But I had questions regarding the SAO lead investigator, the assistant state's attorney, and the public defender, where it says non-compliance with Safety Act. Does that simply mean that we might?
Yeah, it's a very, very general term. As we've said for months, our criminal justice team has been very lean, very conservative in how they're proposing to respond to safety. When you compare it to what some of our neighboring counties, it is remarkable. But it's still a great unknown. We don't know. And this handful of positions have been proposed by our criminal justice team as what they need to meet the Safety Act.
Okay, thank you. So, and then my second question regarding clarification, are we supposed to be going line by line before Tuesday and kind of deciding which one of these are?
Remember, we don't have to do any of these.
Okay.
But if the sentiment is to not take that 990 in CPI, then we need to come up with it. And I'd prefer to have it on paper before we get here Tuesday night.
Okay.
We don't need to do any of this.
Okay. And so are we supposed to be going forward and saying, yes, we're okay with this, or no, we're not okay with this, or are we just gonna wait for Tuesday, maybe potentially amend it on the floor?
Let me try. Mike, you can help. Finance Committee.
Yes, I got a mic now.
Finance Committee, I think it was October 5th, following a September 30th presentation, said the budget as presented is fine.
Okay.
Move it forward.
Okay, thank you.
And that's where we are.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, when we have this line item to potentially reduce the non-union wage increase from the 4 to 3, I'm looking at the collective bargaining agreement with the county sheriff, time period beginning 12/1 of 22, and obviously it says in here that we're gonna try to keep things consistent with non-union and union employees, but this clearly says that and I do support this, but we're doing a wage increase of 4% for those, for the union employees, but then on here, I would be concerned that we're not doing that for the non-union.
I'd be concerned as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Altoff.
I apologize, because I'm also gonna sound a little passionate and preachy, probably. Yeah, me. Number one, nobody wants to raise taxes. There's not a single solitary person, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of whatever, that wants to raise taxes, particularly now when we're facing inflation and we're talking about all the demands that are going to be made. However, 2 comments. One, I come from state government. Worst thing in the world is to have people come to you and not be able to provide those services, right? Number 2 is not to keep up with the maintenance and the operations that we need to keep up with, because you just fall further and further and further behind, and it costs more money. So those people that don't pay today are gonna pay 5 times more money tomorrow. Number 2, come prepared. If there are situations and you don't wanna do it, and there's not the money there, then come with solutions. We've been talking about this budget, how long? The Finance Committee has been talking about it for how long? We had options that were presented by staff. We shouldn't be having substantive conversations about things you don't like now when we're voting on it on Tuesday. Go to the Finance Committees, talk to the Finance Chair, talk to the Chairman, talk to staff. If there are substantive things we need to consider to change, it shouldn't come before this body today. It should have been here before. So staff has time to evaluate and present us options. I hate these conversations. You have a recommendation from the Finance Committee. You've had 4 options presented by staff who we all commend for putting in a zillion hours of time, and then we sit up here and we don't take or don't consider the recommendations. I don't want to raise taxes either, but I think what's being presented is unbelievably reasonable and responsible. We have an obligation to make decisions for the people that elect us. Go back and tell them why we're doing what we're doing. And then also tell them it's not easy. But we want to make sure that they can count on their government when they need their government. I thank you. I thank you. I thank you for all of the hard efforts that you guys do. And that's why they elect us, people, to make the tough decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wegner?
Thank you. So I've talked to a lot of people in the past couple months, and I'll tell you, I ran into many older residents who have to leave because they're on a fixed income and they can't live in this county anymore. And obviously that's not just us. You look at the schools. I read the paper today, and one of the school systems is raising their tax levy 9%, and another one's raising 4%. So I did pass this through finance, saying that I didn't agree with everything, but I thought it should be talked by with the full board. I was also the person who suggested that we come prepared with items that we don't want on the budget if we don't want to take CPI. And I think that's important that we be held accountable for what we say we're going to take off. And I really, really appreciate this list that you guys created. So I will come prepared on Monday. I have a hard time taking CPI. I'm Tuesday, sorry. But I also want to say again that we store cash because we have projects that we hold the cash for to pay the projects as it comes. There's nothing, I think responsibly we should be putting out bonds for some of these large capital projects. Randall Road, some of the things that cost millions of dollars, we can pay them as we go. And we're not kicking the can down the road, we are paying them as we spend them. And that way the cash that we have on hand, we can invest back in the community. There's a lot of people who need that economic investment or need that help with the senior services grant or the different services. So I think this is something we need to think about because we keep finding ourselves in this position, whether we take CPI, whether we don't, well, we can lessen the burden by putting out some bonds. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen on Tuesday night. But as I said, I'll come prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Meshes?
Thank you. I want to thank Cheryl and Kevin and Peter for all the time they've given me and quickly comply with my requests. One of the requests I had was a list of all of the open positions that we currently have open and their salary ranges. And we currently have open position, the total yearly salary or compensation of the employees that we do not have yet, but we would like to have is $5.3 million and more. And many of the departments are in need of employees, some more than others. For instance, the Sheriff's Department has $1.9 probably budgeted, and that's the question I was trying to ask him. How much of they have $1.9 million in salary openings that aren't going to be used at this moment, but they hope, of course, to hire, right? What percentage of this money do we think we're actually going to spend in this budget? Because and Kevin and Peter did answer this yesterday to me in a meeting, but now I'm asking it again for the whole board to know your response.
Just remember, Ms. Meshes, when we talk about the number of dollars that are available, those are not all general fund dollars. And that's a very critical decision. We are trying to balance the general fund with this. You wanted the question is, how many sheriff's office staff do you think we're going to hire?
Well, I mean, it's not just, they just have the largest portion. Valley High has a lot. I mean, this can be forwarded to the rest of the board members so they can see what the openings are.
I'll answer the same way I did yesterday when we had the conversation, and you guys can help me. But remember, we already budget 2% less in our large departments because of vacancies we know where exist. We budget 1% less in salaries in our smaller departments. We don't budget for the merit increases. That gets absorbed as well. In addition to that, and this is something we've never done before, but we're doing it this year because of this unique challenge in hiring. We're pulling back another $500,000 from general fund salaries and hoping that the positions don't fill. Because if they do, we don't have enough money. But we know that there's going to be a number of vacancies on January 1st. And that's how we're trying to look at this situation uniquely. That was one of the solutions that we kind of came up with after we did our presentation on September 30th. So, you know, is the solution to make that number bigger? I guess we could do that too.
Right. Well, that is one of my solutions on how to bring this down.
Okay.
Is to make that number a bigger number because it's a lot. The other thing is
the challenge there, Teresa. Just if I don't want to be argumentative, but things will change, and there will be a time when we do need the dollars to pay all those positions when we do fill them.
Right. I mean, I do think this list probably should be forwarded out to the board so they realize how large an issue this employment issue is on the board. That this has got to be something that the next board solves, or makes large measures in, because this is an incredible amount. I have to think that this is vastly larger amount of openings than we've seen in the past. So the employee issue has to be addressed. And so that was my suggestion. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Collins.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple things I wanted to point out, and I appreciate Ms. Altoff's comments, and she's absolutely correct. The time to be having this debate is the months before this. But in order for that debate to happen, it has to be an open and honest debate about where the county is and where the finances are and what the county is doing. And truth be told, we're wrestling right now with, you know, a $1.2 million, $1.5 million shortfall, but the shortfall is much, much larger than that. You talked about fund balances and where they're at, and that's a problem that's been brewing for 4 or 5 years. We're really talking, you know, more along the lines, even for getting transportation back to where it needs to be, you know, $3 million there. Okay, Mr. Scholar presented at a couple meetings ago a multi-year problem coming down the road, which has required tax levy increases every year to stay ahead of that. It's not just this year, it's years and years to come and come and come. So for the people that are going to be on the board in December and for the new members that are coming in, the challenge is going to be huge. And that next board has to be willing to look at all options on the table. It has to be looking at bridge funding at township levels. It has to be willing to look at bonds for capital projects. Okay, that's not kicking down the road. If you own a business and you're buying a piece of equipment, you don't run and hand somebody $1 million check. You fund that through your bank. Okay, we should not be bonding to pay payroll expenses or things along those types of lines. That is kicking the can down the road. But this board and the board to come is going to have some very difficult decisions to make. And the challenge is not just simply saying, have the conversation. It has to be an open and honest conversation about all things on the table. And it is going to be a multi-year process to get there. Raising the tax levy $900,000 is being done partly to try and keep it small. But it really should be a much, much larger increase. And I think we all recognize that and know that. We're just afraid to say that. And not going in that direction, I think, is hiding from the problem, and that's kicking the can down the road. And that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jensen.
Well, I'm in agreement with John Collins about the big picture, about the future of the county and its finances. And I think that we have a great financial modeling program, software program. It was very helpful to us at Valley High to really talk about the levy and the future of Valley High, bed mixes and all those variables. But that financial modeling software is excellent, where we give people in the future, the new county board members and the returning ones, about the challenges, the future challenges of the county, and it will help them conceptualize what the issues are instead of just talking about verbally or having a piece of paper, all those things involved. And I'm deferring to you, Kevin. I mean, we've had some financial modeling with that software in the past, but to me, I think it should be more of an ongoing, like on a quarterly basis, to really see where we're at and how do we build to the future. And lastly, there may be other funding opportunities that may occur within the federal government or state government that could help with some of those budgetary priorities. And here we are. We've been having that discussion for a while, and all of a sudden we say, oh, lo and behold, we're trying to find a way to deal with this. But we're going to have, I'm taking a look. I think we're gonna have about 50% new people approximately on the county board. And there's a learning curve involved with the complexity of how we do our work. And it's gonna be a challenge for you, Chairman, as well as for many of the people sitting up here, trying to figure out where do we go from here? And that's just merely a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments, I just want to make one statement as far as the county board has gone to great lengths to pay down our debt over the years. Suggesting that we should borrow or sell bonds to pay for our capital projects, for a business, it might make sense. But that's a for-profit business. This is county government. You borrow money in a business so that the equipment that you purchase can start generating revenue for you. Unless this is a revenue-generating exercise or enterprise, it just doesn't make sense. And I'll just leave it at that. So seeing,
I want to point out that before your tenure, the Mental Health Board went out for bonding for their building and for the construction, and they went to great lengths to pay off the bonds earlier instead of later, because they acknowledged that it didn't make good business sense to continue doing that. But are you aware that we went out for bonds with the Mental Health Board? And there was a lot of debate about whether we should, well, first initially go for the bonding, and I was up here at the time and I voted no on that. But they had approval to move forward, and after they got into the situation, they decided to pay off sooner rather than later because it didn't make good business sense at the Mental Health Board. So I'm amplifying what you're saying, Chair.
Dr. Jensen, Mr. Gottemoller.
Yes, just to give you an idea though, from a board perspective, the last time the cost of living increase was taken by this board, I believe was 2012 or maybe 2011 for the 2012 year. Since that time, at least according to Google, the inflation has eaten that dollar that we took in 2012 at the rate of 29.8%. So we've taken no cost of living for 10 years, and our dollars are buying 30% less today than they were then. So I'm not a big fan of taking cost of living. I have never voted for doing it yet, but I think to be responsible, it's going to have to be done this time.
Mr. Gottemoller, Ms. Schofield.
Can I just add to that, because I was going to say it, is, and on top of that, we cut the budget significantly over that time. So, I mean, we knew there was going to be an end, and the end was actually like 5 years ago. So I just want to point that out as well.
Ms. Campbell.
I just want to make one observation, because I do understand not wanting to take on debt, but I can't help myself. I have to comment on this one. When we purchase something like a water tower or we're investing in a road, to use current tax dollars to pay for that up front, when it's going to be used by future generations over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, part of the process of putting a bond out there is to spread that cost over those people who are actually going to use it over that time. I'm not advocating for that. I'm not advocating for a bond at all. I think it was great that you guys paid that off. I love the fact that we don't have it. I understand it really helps our credit rating, but there is a place for bonds in local government. Just had to say that.
Thank you. Seeing no further comment, we do have need for executive session today. So I'll entertain a motion to enter executive session in accordance with 5 ILCS 122C21 pertaining to discussion of minutes. Mr. Vijik makes the motion, Ms. Meshes seconds, and we need to call the roll, please. Alicia.
Evang. Acosta. Altoff. Bates. Campbell.
Yes.
Collins.
Here. Yes. It's a yes or no vote.
Doherty. Gottemoller. Gendrich. Young.
That's, I'm just counting that.
Kearns. Meshes. Yes. Nowak. Parrish. Carolyn. Schofield. Schwartz. Scala.
No. He's leaving.
Smith. Thorson. Bejuk.
Yes.
Von Bergen. Wegener. Wilbeck. Jensen.
Ms. Parrish seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Thorson, seconded by Ms. Parrish. All in favor say aye. Aye. Against?